And welcome aboard a Tuesday edition of the Sports Bash here live on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app, live video streaming on our YouTube channel. You can watch the show live. Eagles in Washington tonight, a lot on the line, breaking it down. How you be? I'm your host, Mike Gill. Josh Henning producing today's show. You out there, Tuesday football. What's better? You know, on Sunday, when everybody's playing and your team has the game postponed, you have that feeling of like, oh, man, I just want the game to be on. Last night, we had two football games, something I think the NFL should look into doing in the future. A 5 o'clock doubleheader football, perfect. I'll take that, please. That was great last night. Wasn't on too late. The first game started, 5 o'clock's a little early, I guess, for the people on the West Coast, which I don't care. Forget the people on the West Coast. They don't count anyway. But 5 o'clock was a great time for the kick last night. That game ended at a great time. And then the second game, you're like, I got another game left to go. And I think they should try to do that moving forward. But the late game last night was not a good one. I mean, the Minnesota Vikings beat the Chicago Bears, who are probably one of the worst teams I've seen. Like, if you watch them, they've been on prime time the last couple of weeks. If you watch them end to end enough, you will see a horrible football team. And you know what? They are a horrifically coached football team. More so than they are a bad coach team, the officiating in that game last night was a disgrace. It was absolutely embarrassing to watch that. I'm embarrassed for the poor officials. I hate to sit here and trash them. I'm actually embarrassed for them. They're so bad. How about the moment where Nagy takes the flag and he just spikes it in the guy's face, and then I think they changed the call on the field because the guy was just like, all right, we mucked this one up so bad. We're just going to give it to you at this point. It's just an utter embarrassment week after week, game after game. It's not even week after week. It's game after game. The officiating in the early game was an atrocity yesterday. Somebody tweeted last night. What did the guy say? And, he says, I can't believe the inept officiating tonight. I'm like, really? Tonight? This happens in every game, every week. If there's one thing about the NFL we do know is that the officiating is going to be inept. That's the only consistent thing that we have in the NFL. We don't know who's going to win from week to week. We don't know what the standings are going to look like from week to week. The only thing I'm sure of in the NFL is that the officials are going to be an utter embarrassment in every game, every week. They are the biggest joke in all of sports. The NFL officials are the worst at their jobs than anybody out there. They're horrendous. They're horrific. And that guy said this officiating is really inept tonight. Tonight! Every game, they're horrible. I mean, the Bears are so bad. They're so bad. I tweeted out that Justin Fields, God bless him. What pick was he, Josh? Second? No, he wasn't 2.
No, he was like 12.
Okay. This is Justin Fields. Might be a nice talent. He might be a super nice kid. Apparently, he's got greatly. I mean, he was the guy, if you remember last year, when the Big 12 said they were going to shut down their season. He was the guy who basically got the petition and got everybody together, or the Big 10, I should say, to say, no, we want to play. He's terrible.
He was the 11th pick, by the way. I was one off.
He's the 11th pick in the draft. This is Exhibit A. Trey Lance is Exhibit B. Trevor Lawrence is C. Pick another rookie this year who stinks. These are all guys who were overdrafted. Now, Lawrence wasn't overdrafted. You had to take him number 1. I don't think I personally didn't think the hype was going to match Lawrence. None of this can. No player can ever match the hype that will be put into him. You're almost damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If you're an organization that is told you have to take this guy, he is the generational talent. And if you don't take him, you made the biggest mistake in the franchise's history. Like every year we get that player and it turns into like a real life draft day. Where if Kevin Costner was running the club, he would know there's no way that Trevor Lawrence can live up to the hype that everybody's making him out to be. So we're just not going to take him because even if he's good, he's not going to be that good. And we'll just pass on him and move on to the next guy. You can't not take him. But I just never saw Trevor Lawrence as this, oh my God, generational player. Just never saw it.
It's funny you bring this up about Fields and Lawrence because Mike Tannenbaum was on Get Up this morning and he said he thinks the Jacksonville job is more appealing than Chicago because he likes the quarterback situation there better than Chicago.
Well, I like Lawrence better than Fields. I think Fields is horrible. I mean, look, it might be right now this season. He's got a bad coaching staff. Bad coaches form bad habits. I think Fields right now is horrendous. I mean, last night he was horrendous. Now, I do admit, I thought they had horrible play calling. But look, the throw he misses to Mooney in the back of the end zone, you got to make that throw. It's horrible. He was horrible last night, Fields. Horrible. But last night I'm watching Fields, Lawrence the other day. Lance, I haven't seen it. He has barely plays.
Right.
Who's the other rookie that I'm forgetting?
Wilson? Zach Wilson with the Jets?
Oh, Zach Wilson. Yeah, oh my God. He's the worst of the lot.
I was like, to me, Wilson has to be the worst.
Yeah, Mac Jones is pretty decent. He's actually regressed a little bit, I think, in the last couple of weeks. But look, my point on this is with the Eagles, these are exhibits A, B, C, D, and F. Why you don't just take a quarterback because you think you need one, right?
Right.
All of these teams take quarterbacks because they're like, we have to get a quarterback. You got to take a guy. How the hell did anybody look at Justin Fields and say, this is the guy?
Well, he was a great college quarterback. He had a lot of ability.
So is Gino Torretta.
Yeah, but Fields has better physical abilities than Gino Torretta. I mean, come on, let's not be silly.
I'm just saying. I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, at some point, you have to take into account who these guys are playing against. Ohio State, he's running around making plays with his legs and just absolutely taking advantage of terrible secondaries at places like Indiana and Purdue and Northwestern. And I mean, come on, man. Like, you got to take that into account. I don't think problem is a guy like Fields, what does he have? 1 full year of playing. That's all you get to really take a look at him.
Yeah, like 1.5.
Right, I'm saying 1 full year.
Yeah.
So you didn't get like a career to really look at him.
Right.
And you don't get a chance to assess. Like, everybody wants to leave early. You're only assessing them on like half the games that you used to assess guys. And you were making mistakes on guys when you had 4 years to take a look at them. Now you're getting 1.5 years to assess guys. It's just not fair for these talent evaluators. Hey, look, and I'm not writing Fields off. He might get a new coach who gets a hold of him, but I don't know. I wasn't even all that impressed with him at Ohio State, to be honest with you.
I mean, I liked him at Ohio State. I thought he could be a good NFL quarterback. I just think that the Bears coaching staff is just that bad.
Well, here's another problem. You know, he's a guy, like a lot of these players, he is so dominant at the college level based on the fact that he can run.
Mm-hmm.
In the NFL, you could run and be successful. But last night he runs and he fumbles. I mean, he takes a tiny little hit and he fumbles. I mean, he didn't even get hit hard. I mean, he barely got hit and he fumbled.
Well, this gets back to the issues of if you don't have enough time in college to become better at holding the ball and all that stuff, that becomes a problem.
Fields will be a backup in the future. This quarterback class was overrated. That's on the text board. The problem is this quarterback class, you're right, was overrated. But in the beginning of the whole draft class, people were making this like, oh, this is the year you got to get a quarterback. This is the best quarterback class since like 2003. You got to get a quarterback in this draft. This is the year you got to get one. And then you keep hearing about the Eagles. You got to get a quarterback. You got to take a quarterback. This quarterback class this year stinks. There's nobody in this class that's close to the 5 or 6 guys that were taken in this class, and this is why you don't reach for a quarterback.
It's funny you say it because Tom McShay literally said this past weekend, him and Mel Kiper's draft special that was on ESPN2 I saw, they were saying there's no quarterback available this year you would draft ahead of the 5 in the first round last year.
Holy
None.
mackerel.
There's nobody who has the potential, like ceiling, in the NFL. So if we're saying this about Lawrence and Fields and Wilson and the guys this year, my goodness, you do not want to be the team that needs a quarterback going into next year's draft.
Right. And it's like, well, you got to get a quarterback somehow. Yeah, guess what? Maybe the quarterback position turns into the running back position where you just take them in the 3rd round. Sorry.
Or maybe you just stop giving them stupid amounts of money when they're not good enough.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Look at Kirk Cousins.
Everybody overdrafts the quarterback because they feel like they have to have him. So you take a guy that really should be picked in the 3rd round and you take him in the 1st round. That's my point is running backs, there's a lot of guys who are 1st-round talents, but the league has now said, you know what? We don't need these guys. These are guys you can just plug and play. Well, most of these quarterbacks are plug and play. I mean, you took Baker Mayfield, number 1 overall. Now, Nick Mullins didn't have a great game last night, but was he any worse than Baker Mayfield?
I mean, I think Baker would make a little more throws, but I don't think Baker's winning them the game per se. But the problem is, look at Kirk Cousins last night. Kirk Cousins was playing against the Bears secondary that had a bunch of dudes off the street, practice squad guys, and yet they scored just 17 points. Their offense struggled, and you're giving Kirk Cousins $85 to $90 million in guaranteed money. That's where we are right now. Unless you have Brady or Rodgers or one of the elite guys, they're all kind of the same, aren't they?
No, that's the thing. There's Brady and Rodgers, Mahomes, and Justin Herbert's young, and
Russell Wilson.
I would put that he's had a very good career.
But outside of a handful of guys.
Russell Wilson was drafted in the 3rd round.
Yes,
Brady was in the 6th round. These
Rodgers
are guys.
Was late 1st round.
Rodgers was way late in the 1st round. Even Mahomes wasn't the number 1 overall pick. Most of these guys who are having success are guys that were not this overhyped number 1 guy.
They were developed.
Even go back to Roethlisberger in that class of
he was the 3rd guy.
04. He was the other guy. It was Rivers and Manning and Roethlisberger. He was the last of the 3.
And Roethlisberger's had the best career, you could say.
Arguably, he's been the most accomplished guy. I mean, Manning's won 2 Super Bowls.
I mean, Roethlisberger has his own Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's 2 Super Bowls as well. But I would say that statistically speaking, Rivers might be the best. But the most accomplished guy in terms of wins, losses, Super Bowls, playoff success is Roethlisberger.
Right.
Manning has the 2 Super Bowls. Great. But other than that, he's a 500 player. Roethlisberger has been to the playoffs every single year of his career for the most part. So it's crazy. Lamar Jackson, by the way, was the MVP of the league. He was the last pick of the 1st round. Like, we just need to stop overdrafting these guys. That guy, Fields last night, was just so indecisive, so in over his head.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that's, again, this isn't an indictment that he stinks or anything. It's too much, too fast, overdrafted. You draft these guys, then you feel like you have to get them on the field. What happened to just drafting a guy, letting them sit, watch? Rodgers, best quarterback in the league. Mahomes, best quarterbacks in the league. They both sat a full year.
But also, Mike, isn't it the laziness by certain people? They want to draft a quarterback and hope he solves all the problems instead of building a team.
Well, that's why I go back to, regardless of what happens tonight with the Eagles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of what happens with the Eagles in this game tonight, build the team, figure the quarterback thing out later. You do not have to waste your 3 draft picks that you've worked so hard to get. Do not waste these 3 picks that could certainly help out your 53-man roster and speed up the process just to draft a quarterback who you're going to be reaching on. There's no question that if you draft a quarterback in this 1st round, you are reaching You are reaching to take a quarterback in this first round. Kenny Pickett is not a first-round guy.
No. In a year where there would be better quarterbacks, he is at most a second-round pick.
Right, and it's like the year that Geno Smith came out. Look, I'm a big Geno, West Virginia guy. He was being talked about as the number 1 overall pick. Why? Because he was the best college quarterback, and he was the only college quarterback that year.
Mhm.
For a while there, he was now who else got drafted in that draft class? In Geno Smith's draft class? Because if you remember, Geno Smith was in mock drafts as the number 1 overall pick almost all the way through the process up until like the last couple of weeks. And he didn't end up going until the second round. And Geno Smith, I hate to say it, he stinks. Look, I love Geno in college. He was awesome. But in the class, so they
Manual that year.
Oh, geez. And E.J. Manuel was another guy. Played only 1 year at Florida State, kind of had a really good year. Oh, he's really good. He played at Florida State 1 year. He might as well be a first-round pick. Well, they took him 13th overall.
16 by Buffalo. You're
Okay.
close. After Geno Smith was Mike Glennon.
Oh, geez.
After that, Philadelphia drafted Matt Barkley. Thanks, Chip Kelly.
Matt Barkley, man, he was another guy. That was a 4th-rounder. People thought if Matt Barkley would have came out the year before that he would have been a first-round pick.
Yeah. Remember Ryan Nassib?
I do. In fact, he went to Syracuse.
Yep.
And if you remember, there was a time where people actually had him rated as the best quarterback in that class.
Yes.
People thought he was going to be a first-round pick.
Don't forget about Landry Jones from Oklahoma.
Landry Jones was so bad as the backup to Ben Roethlisberger, and he has bounced around the XFLs of the world, all those leagues.
Your other quarterbacks drafted that year are a lot of no names, from Tyler Wilson to Brad Sorensen to Zach Dysert to B.J. Daniels, and don't forget about Sean Renfrey.
A lot of those guys, I don't know who they are, but the guys that you mentioned before, Nassib, he was talked about being, oh, man, Nassib's shooting up draft boards. He might be a first-round pick. In fact, some talent evaluators think he's the best of the lot. Do not get sucked in, people. Mike, I don't know how you could say Wilson looks the worst. He is the worst supporting cast, and if you actually watch games, he's probably made some of the best throws out of all the rookies. I don't disagree with that. I've actually said he has a good arm. He can make plays. Here's the problem, Cole. He looks scared bleepless out there. He's scared out of his mind. He is not ready. He is not ready to play at this level in that city. He's not ready. He might be great 3 years down the line. I'm not writing him off, but he is. What do you mean you can't say how he's looked the worst? He's looked the worst.
He literally has.
I'm just telling you what I see. You're giving me every reason why he looks the worst and saying you can't say he looks the worst, but this is why he looks the worst. But no, he looks the worst because he's looked the worst. It's all encompassing. He's not ready. He might be great. He might turn out to be the greatest quarterback in the history of the Jets franchise, which really isn't saying all that much, but he might. But right now, he looks the worst. Why? He's scared out of his mind out there. Now, he's got talent. No one's saying he doesn't have talent. Ryan Leaf had a ton of talent. He had a bazooka for an arm. He could fire it down the field. Jeff George, we know his story. Tons of guys have great talent. Justin Fields has talent. I'm not saying he doesn't belong in the league. Wilson certainly belongs. He's got the arm talent. He can move. He makes plays with his feet. Unfortunately, he's scared out of his mind. He's not ready. These guys aren't ready. That's the problem. We're drafting quarterbacks, over-drafting quarterbacks. They're not ready. Wilson played what? 1 season at BYU?
2.5.
Not ready, man.
But the problem with Wilson was that he was.
By the way, Lance didn't even. He played 1 game last year.
1 game.
1 game at North Dakota State. And they took him number 2 or 3 overall?
3 overall. I mean, he started the full year before that, but he only had an actual
right, but he played 1 game last year.
Right. So in basically 2 years, he played with the equivalent of a season in 1 game.
Yeah, Zach Wilson, not ready. I mean, look, BYU.
Well, the problem with Wilson at BYU was, and I documented this last year, and that was every time he played a team that was highly ranked. He stunk. He struggled against the best teams when the lights were the brightest. That's not a good sign. At least with Justin Fields, some of his best games were against Clemson and Alabama. Like, okay, you were like, all right, I can see Justin Fields stepped up in the big moment. Zach Wilson didn't. Now, as you said earlier, that doesn't mean that Wilson and Fields and these guys, if they get a better coaching situation, they can't be better. Look what happened to Jared Goff.
Cole from LBI chimes back in. He says, sounds like most quarterbacks that turn out to be good are drafted by some of the best coaching staff, not early in the draft. Later in the first round or later in the draft, the good coaches know how to teach people how to play the game right. Yeah. You end up getting the Detroits of the world, the Cincinnatis, the Clevelands, the Oaklands, they bad teams. They reach. They don't have the right coaches. And that quarterback almost doesn't have a chance because of where he is. If Zach Wilson is playing for Belichick now, I might be having a different conversation. He might not look like he's scared out of his mind. He might look way more prepared. You know, what did Brady say, the man in the arena? And he said, every Tuesday, I sat with Belichick, and we just sat in his office for hours, and he threw every single defensive possibility that I might see. He showed it to me on Tuesday, so I saw it. I saw every blitz. I saw where they were coming from. I knew what was happening. Do you think Robert Saleh is sitting with Zach Wilson every Tuesday and showing him every blitz possibility that's coming his way?
No, absolutely not.
There's no possible way. And look, that's everywhere. I think Dan Campbell was doing that with Jared Goff even this year. He's not even a rookie, and he still stinks.
Yeah.
You think that that's what's happening with Matt Nagy, that he's sitting down with Justin Fields and showing him every possible.
Well, the problem with Nagy is he might be sitting down, but Nagy's just so incompetent that he.
That's what I'm saying.
Can't get the job
You
done.
think he's really like as shrewd as Belichick is? Even if he's sitting down with him, do you think he's got going as in depth and as deep and as stern to show him these things?
Absolutely not.
Last night, watching that game, the biggest takeaway that I took, look, Minnesota wins. They are now the 7th seed. We're going to break down the standings. Pete Thompson's going to join me on the other side. We'll do a Tuesday with Thompson. PT's heading to the game, so we're going to do PT early today. So he's on his way heading up there. We're going to have news on the Washington football team here in just a little bit. I think you're going to have some clarity on who will be starting at quarterback for them shortly. I got this text a little while ago from Sal Palantonio, and it reads, a senior Washington football team official told Sal that none of the 16 players on the team COVID list passed the COVID test taken last night. So none have yet to be cleared to play tonight. That includes Tyler Heineke, the starting quarterback. The team official says that a second test taken this morning by all 16 players is still in the lab in New Jersey, and the team is waiting for those results, which should be available by 2:30 today. All the players remain at the team facility in Ashburn, Virginia. Any player that passes this morning's test will get on a private jet, which is waiting at Dulles International Airport for a half-hour flight to Philadelphia in time for the 7 p.m. kickoff. Think about that. You have guys still on the ground in Washington waiting to get their results back to see if they can play in the game tonight. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Holy moly. So get your text messages coming, 609-403-0973. Mike, it's so difficult to build a 53-man roster. How many can you hit on? If you get a real deal quarterback, it band-aids the other 52. I'm not really sure where their comment's going, but you are right. If you get Tom Brady, the Patriots didn't have great wide receivers. They had an okay running game when they got Corey Dillon, but they were really just, they never really had star players other than Brady. Their defense was the star in a lot of those games, and then Brady. You get that quarterback. Here's the problem. That quarterback doesn't exist. He comes around once every 20 years. Sports Bash live, 97.3 ESPN. When we come back, The PT's here. It's a Tuesday with Thompson coming up next. 2:53. Thanks to the PT for a Tuesday with Thompson. He's heading up to the game tonight. We'll have news on the Washington football team and who's in and who's out for them as it comes out here. So crazy situation. They are getting tested on the airplane tarmacs, essentially. Not really, but kind of. They have an airplane waiting for them. It's about a half-hour flight from there to here, Philly, and they are waiting to find out whether or not some of these guys are back or not, including who will play quarterback tonight. Over on the text board, 609-403-0973. Mike, this is crazy. Do we know the status of the Eagles players, O-line specifically? If you're asking about Landon Dickerson, I don't think Dickerson is going to play. I don't have that official yet, but that's what I'm hearing is that Landon Dickerson is not going to be able to play tonight, which would be really unfortunate. Really unfortunate. You have a situation where Landon Dickerson has been tremendous for this team, and for him not to be out there is unfortunate. I mean, it's a situation where they're probably going to have to go to Suopeta, and you think about this. Sayamala's out. He's the starting left guard. Dickerson's in. He's probably better, right? He is probably better than Sayamala, but now you're going to your third left guard, and on the right side, you're down to your third right guard, essentially, because Brandon Brooks went out, Jack Driscoll went out. So it is a tough situation for Philadelphia tonight, where they are now, 6 different guards have played for this team. It is the one thing that we talked about all season long. Their offensive line is really, really good. But this team, I said, could be successful as long as their offensive line stayed healthy. Well, unfortunately, right now, the offensive line a little banged up tonight with the whole situation with the COVID. We're going to break it all down coming up next hour. Michael Kaskey-Blomain as well. Did you watch the Sixers game last night? You might have been caught up in the football, but I flipped over to the fourth quarter of the Sixers, and it was worth my time. Joel Embiid was worth it. We'll talk about JoJo and the impact he had last night. Also, Andrew DiCecco, football at 4. John Keim from the Washington Football Beat, ESPN.com, Washington's NFL Nation reporter. Casey Joyner with one thought on every game tonight at 5 o'clock, and Rob Maaddi at 5:30. Hope to stick around here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. All right, 3 o'clock hour here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill. Sports Bash is brought to you by Matt Blatt Nissan. The all-new Matt Blatt Nissan now open. Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township. Next to Home Depot. Online at mattblattnissan.com. So let's take a look at what happened last night and how it affected everything, because those two games both had some sort of impact on the playoffs, okay? Now, I would say that we're going to do who's in, who's out tomorrow, because there's still two games tonight that have a factor in the playoff race. So I really can't do who's in, who's out today without knowing who's won those games. So I will hold that off for tomorrow. Do we have any update on any Washington or Philadelphia players yet?
So far, the only guy I've seen is Mike Garafolo reporting that Tim Settle has cleared the protocols. He's a D tackle.
All right, so he will be back tonight, and that gives them, we talked a lot about their defensive line on Friday. It looked like their whole defensive line is out. Now it looks like they're getting most of their defensive line back.
Correct. They're going to have at least some depth there. There are still, according to reports, 15 guys on the COVID list as of right now.
All right, that includes their quarterback.
Yes.
Is that both the quarterbacks? Kyle Allen, is he on that list as well?
Allen and Heineke are both on the list.
Right. Garrett Gilbert is kind of scheduled to start tonight.
Right. He's the one they're planning on starting in case they can get one of those guys cleared and then fly him to Philly real quick.
How about that? Adam Schefter reported that Garrett Gilbert is still in line to start tonight. It would be kind of an emergency start situation, and it hinges on the fact that Tyler Heineke and Kyle Allen both have not cleared the COVID-19 protocols. Now, keep in mind, if one of them all of a sudden decide to pass it, it's not like they're sitting in Philadelphia right now.
Right.
In the event that they do pass it. If they do, in fact, pass the COVID test, they would then have to get on a plane and fly here. Now, it's only about a half an hour to fly from D.C. to Philly on a private jet, but they're not even currently at 3 o'clock on game day in the right city at this point. Now,
Correct.
Schefter said there's a small chance that either one of those guys could test positive in time to play this game. So he reports that Garrett Gilbert would be, for all intents and purposes, the starter in this game.
Right. And obviously, all of this comes down to the fact that because the game was moved, Washington is using every inch they can to get as many guys back as they can for this game.
Well, and we know that it affected Philadelphia because obviously now Landon Dickerson, if the game was on Sunday, I don't think he would have been able to play on Sunday either.
No, because the test came in that morning. That's how it works.
Mm-hmm. Real quick, just while we're on the subject of testing and all this and that, the Flyers game tonight has been postponed. That game will not go on. So if you're going to the Eagles game tonight and you're worried about parking, the Wells Fargo Center lot has been now opened up for you because the Flyers game has been postponed. Apparently, the Washington Capitals had 3 players test positive today during their open skate.
Yeah.
And they had to cancel the game. So the Flyers are now done. They will not play another game until Wednesday, the 29th, when they are in Seattle against the Kraken.
Yeah, the NHL pretty much is just shutting down the league because apparently their COVID issues are way more out of control than anybody else's is, which it's a perplexing conversation because guess what, Mike? Everyone but one player in the NHL is vaccinated.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So
that guy, there's one guy.
Can you
imagine if he was the super spreader?
Well, he's not.
He's not. I'm just saying, can you imagine if that was the case? The one guy brought the whole league down.
Yeah. Again, according to reports from the NHL Network, the one guy is not on a team that's currently on shutdown.
All right.
For COVID problems.
Good for him.
Yeah, good for him.
All right. This is the situation from yesterday. All right. Over in the ASC, Vegas wins last night. Vegas at the beginning of the day was 13th. Right. They ended the day 10th. But they also ended the day ahead of Denver, Cleveland, and Miami. They are the highest ranked 7-7 team. The situation in the AFC is like this. It's wild, dude. I mean, you think tonight's game in the NFC is wild, but the AFC, the Chiefs are the 1 seed. They are 1 game up on New England. They are 1 game up on Tennessee. The 4th seed is Cincinnati. They are 8-6.
Right.
Indianapolis is the first wild card. They are 8-6. The Chargers are the next wild card. They are 8-6. Buffalo is the next wild card. They are 8-6. The first team out of the playoffs is Baltimore. They are 8-6. Pittsburgh is next. They are 7-6-1. They are the 9 seed currently. Then Vegas, then Miami, then Cleveland, and then Denver are all 7-7. So I would really say all 3 wild cards are still up for grabs in the AFC.
Absolutely.
The AFC North is still very much up for grabs, and the AFC South is still up for grabs. And I guess you could make the argument that the AFC East is still up for grabs.
Right, because the Patriots lost to the Colts. That opens the door for Buffalo.
The West is the only one that it looks like the Chiefs are going to get in as the division champion. They're 2 up. They did split with the Chargers. So I guess if the Chiefs lost 2 out of 3 and the Chargers won 2 out of 3, there would be some tie-breaking scenarios that maybe the Chargers could win, but it looks like the Chargers are going to be your Western Conference champions.
The key number is the Chiefs are 4-1 in the division and the Chargers are 2-2.
All right, so there's your answer right there. Although I'm imagining the Chiefs, maybe not, because I know they play the North a bunch here down the stretch. The Chiefs still play the Steelers and the Bengals, so they do not have division games the rest of the way. They only have 1 division game left.
The Chargers
against
have 2.
Denver. But that would give the Chiefs 2 losses, and if the Chargers won both theirs, they'd be 4-2, and the Chiefs would be 4-2. So that would be the one scenario. But it looks like the Chiefs are going to win the West.
Yeah, and I think that's a safe bet for them. And honestly, at this rate, they'll probably get the number 1 seed, too. They're going to get the bye week.
It looks – well, I mean, they're a game up on New England and Tennessee. But, yeah, I feel like, now the Chiefs were going to play a big role in this NFC
in
North.
The NFC, yeah.
Right,
absolutely.
The AFC North, I mean.
It's wild how many teams are playing. Like, everyone is playing their division in the final month, and the Chiefs are like the one team that's not.
Well, the Chiefs are playing the Bengals, and they play – who was the other team I said? The Steelers.
Right.
Okay, so Cleveland losing last night, they would have been the 4 seed. Instead, they're now 12th. How about that?
Who would have thought?
They would have won that game last night. They would have been the 4 seed. Instead, they're number 12. And look, in that game last night, you're shorthanded. You're playing with your 3rd quarterback. They had a shot to win that game.
They did.
And just couldn't get it done. Couldn't make enough plays. That was really what it came down to.
And it's not like the Raiders went in there and were like gangbusters. It's not like they were in there like playing like great football.
It was not a great game last night.
They just didn't have enough at the end of the game. That's
quite frankly, I thought Derek Carr played a terrible game last night.
Derek Carr's another guy that you can talk about and say when he has one coach, he's fine. The other coach is not as good. Remember, Derek Carr's MVP caliber season before he ever got John Gruden.
Kansas City's 1, New England's 2, Tennessee's 3, Cincinnati is the current 4, Indianapolis is 5, Chargers are 6, Buffalo is 7. Then you have Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Raiders, Dolphins, Browns, and Broncos still alive. So 13 teams are in play. The Jets, Texans, and Jaguars are all eliminated. But everybody else is still not only alive, very much alive.
Yeah, there's definitely there's paths to get there. There are actual roads.
Well, they're the 13th seed currently. They're only 1 game back of Buffalo. So
their problem is the quarterback situation with Teddy Bridgewater going down. You got to wonder how they're going to hold up the rest of the way.
Well, you can make a detracting comment for almost every team on the list, right? Denver's got the quarterback situation. Cleveland has a quarterback situation. I guess Baker Mayfield could come back next week. Miami, what's the detracting thing for them? I mean, they're playing some great football right now. Miami plays New Orleans on Monday night. Is it Monday or Sunday next week? It's Monday.
Double-checking. I'm putting on Miami's schedule right
now. Miami plays New Orleans. That's a monster game. They're both 7-7. New Orleans needs it to get into the NFC to keep staying in the NFC race, and then Miami needs it to stay in the AFC race.
Miami's got an interesting road here. So they got the Saints on Monday night, and then the final 2 weeks, Tennessee at Tennessee, and home against New England. So they don't have any easy teams there.
No, but everybody's playing the same level of team. The whole league is about 500 or you know what I mean? Like,
right.
So it's like everything is okay. I guess you could beat them. I guess, that's every game that's left on the schedule here. Over on the NFC, Minnesota wins last night, so they move up to 7.
Correct.
They have the tiebreaker over New Orleans based on their wins in the conference. Minnesota's 5-4. The Saints are 5-5.
Right.
So that could change over the last 3 weeks because I believe Minnesota, their last 3 games are all NFC games. And one's against the Packers and one's against the Rams, and the last one is against Chicago.
Correct.
So they have a pretty tough go, Minnesota, the rest of the way. New Orleans, they play the Dolphins, so that's a non-conference game.
Right, so it's not going to help them in the conference standings.
No, it's not. But it could sure hurt them if they lose that game.
Oh, it definitely would.
And then they've got 2 games that you got to feel pretty good if you're the Saints. Carolina and Atlanta. You're really rooting for Miami hard, right? Kerr brought that up last night. And at first I was like, well, why are the Eagles fans rooting for Miami? Because they're the draft pick situation.
Right.
I didn't realize they were playing the Saints. Well, now I can see, and the Saints have 2 very winnable games after this. So if Washington, and we just talked about this with Pete Thompson, Josh, I don't know if you heard that portion of the conversation, but this is how important the game is tonight. Are you ready?
Yes.
The difference between the win and the loss here, according to 538.com, all right? According to 538.com, right now, the Eagles have a 26% chance of making the playoffs based on where they are. Washington has a 20% chance.
Okay.
If the Eagles win the game tonight, they would go up to 37%. If they lose tonight, Philadelphia would drop down to 5%.
Big drop.
Washington, if they win the game tonight, their percentage of making the playoffs goes up to 42%.
Okay.
And if they lose to Philadelphia tonight, it would be 8%.
Interesting.
So it is almost a must-win game for both these teams. And that's based on the fact that Minnesota won last night and the fact that New Orleans beat Tampa Bay. New Orleans beating Tampa Bay really, I think, threw a major wrench into the wheel of that 7 seed because I think everybody was just kind of writing them off, right? They were writing the Saints off as, they're not any good. They're not really a part of this.
Yeah, they're cooked. They're done.
And then they beat Tampa Bay. And now not only are they in it, they look like they've got the best road to get there because they play Miami, Carolina, and Atlanta, with Miami at 7-7 being the most difficult game they have left on the ledger. Now, you could make an argument, hey, look, they're playing division games against Atlanta and Carolina, but what does Atlanta and Carolina really have to play for at this point?
Not much of anything.
You could make the argument Atlanta's only 1 game out of the playoff mix.
Yes, correct.
They are 6-8.
But they're hanging on by a hope and a prayer.
Ooh, yes, they are. Carolina's done. They're 5-9.
Yeah, they're pretty much toast.
I think the 5-9 teams, Carolina is the one. They're done.
Carolina's got so many problems, too, right now.
Yeah, New York is done. And the Bears, obviously, at 4-10, they were officially eliminated last night.
I mean, when Carolina fired their offensive coordinator, you kind of got a feeling that things were not going too well over there.
No, but San Francisco, when they won on Sunday, I think that solidifies them as the second wild card team.
I agree.
Right? And I've had them in my who's in, who's out for the last year. Well, I had them winning the division early in the year, but I've had them as the wild card 1, 2, 3, 4 straight weeks. So 4 straight weeks I've had San Francisco in the playoffs, and I also had them in week preseason week 1, week 2, and week 3, week 4. Around week 4 is when they started to have some injury issues, and I took them out. So I've been high on San Francisco, but I feel like San Francisco is going to be one of the 2 wild card teams. Tonight's game, though, again, if Washington wins, though, Josh,
Right.
they are the 7 tonight.
Correct.
They would move up to 7 tonight.
And doesn't that also
Not sure why that is, though.
Well, doesn't it also change how you look at the rest of the schedule, too? How it plays out for these guys?
I see why it is. They would be 5-4 in the conference. So would Minnesota. It would go to strength of victory. Washington's 446 and Minnesota's 443.
And that's because of their Tampa win. Remember, they had that game against Tampa.
Right. So it's very narrow.
It's wild how many variables are going on here. All because of this 7 seed.
Well, in the NFC, I would say 12 teams are still alive. In the AFC, you got 13 teams still. But the NFC is a lot more top heavy because the battle for the 1 seed over there, Green Bay, Dallas, Tampa, Arizona, the whole thing with the Rams, they're 9-4. They play tonight. So if the Rams win tonight, you would have 5 teams have double-digit wins on the NFC side.
Yep.
Only 1 team has double-digit wins on the AFC side. But you only have 3 teams with losing records on the AFC side. And on the NFC side, you have 8 teams with a losing record. Now, somebody will have a 500 record after tonight between Washington and Philadelphia. Of course, they could tie. And that would really throw another wrench in the
2
wheel.
straight years of ties? What?
Right. So that's what you're looking at tonight. We're keeping an eye on what is happening around with Washington. They have some testing going on. We are trying to see who could be in and who will be out for them. And obviously, when we find that news out, you guys will know. So keep it locked here to the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. We will open up the text board, 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. This is the Sports Bash. It is live on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. We're happy to have you with us on this Saturday. It feels like the Eagles game is Sunday. It feels like it should be a weekend here, but it's a Tuesday. And, of course, we have the game here for you tonight on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill. Follow me on Twitter at Mike Gill Show. When we come back, did you see the game Joel Embiid had last night? Right? Joel Embiid last night had a epic game last night. Did it prove any of the doubters wrong, though, about the Sixers' ability to close out games? We'll talk about that with Michael Kaskey-Blomain, NBA writer from CBS Sports, coming up next here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Friday, we'll have a special State of the Team show for you here on 97.3 ESPN. The State of the Phillies with Frank Close, State of the Sixers, State of the Eagles with Jeff Mosher, State of the Flyers with Kevin Durso. That's all on Friday's show right here on 97.3 ESPN. We'll start at 2. We'll take you till 6. And then on Friday evening, we'll have the Hawaii Bowl for you here on 97.3 ESPN. Saturday, we have the double dip of the NFL. Packers, Cleveland, Colts, and Cards. And on Sunday, it's Eagles, Giants. And we got that all for you live on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill. Hey, hopefully you got a chance to tune in to Joel Embiid last night. And even if it was just for the last stretch of that game, like the final 8 minutes or so, Joel Embiid scored the final 9 points in the game, fadeaways. I mean, it was just an epic finish last night for one Joel Embiid. We'll talk about it now, what it means for the team. What did they learn from it all? Michael Kaskey-Blomain covers the 76ers for CBS Sports, and he joins us right now here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. What's going on, MKB?
What's up, Mike? How you doing?
All is well in the world, man. Joel Embiid, man, he was a closer last night. Now, I guess the question that comes from that is, can you continue to count on Joel Embiid in that fashion? I mean, he's hitting fadeaway jumpers. He was epic last night, but is that a recipe for, hey, we think we found our guy to close out a big game?
To an extent, Mike. I mean, obviously Joel has the ability to do it, but just with the position he plays and the way he plays the game, it's always going to be somewhat dependent on other guys to step up around him, both to get him the ball in positions where he can succeed, which I thought the team did a good job of doing last night. And also just, providing supplementary scoring around him. As good as Joel was, I thought the fact that he was able to get some serious support from Seth Curry, who had 26, Tobias Harris, who had 25, to, kind of take a little bit of the scoring pressure off of him was huge. So I think obviously, if the Sixers are able to get Joel the ball in the post in the crunch time of games, they're obviously, one of the most dangerous teams in the league. He leads the league in clutch scoring this season. So I think that he's definitely improved in that area, but the Sixers will continue to need other guys to also step up down the stretch of games.
Yeah, I mean, last night they had 92 points from 3 players. Embiid had 41 points, 10 rebounds. I'm watching this guy last night. I heard what he said afterwards. I want to prove, that I can carry a team. He's bringing the ball up. I mean, he's playing tremendous defense, but some of the shots he's taking, he's playing at times almost like he's playing guard for this team right now.
Yeah, and that's something, he's expressed a desire to do over the course of his career. And it's something that I think Ben Simmons' absence has opened up, for him a little bit more. Obviously, when Ben's on the floor, one of the main things that he brings to the team is his ability to push the pace in transition and get the ball up and spray it out to shooters around the perimeter. And in the absence of him, and last night specifically, obviously, in the absence of Tyrese Maxey, also, the Sixers didn't really have that clear-cut guard. And that gave Joel the opportunity to do some of those things where you said, like, you would see him just get a defensive rebound and bring it up himself. There was a couple times where other guys gave him the ball in the backcourt to bring it up and initiate the offense like he was a de facto point guard. And I think that's something, obviously, you don't want him to do that all the time, but it's something that he has in his repertoire. And when he's able to show it off, it just really shows how much of a complete player that he really is.
Yeah, I mean, the first fadeaway, he gives them like a 2-point advantage. They come back, or I guess a 3. They make it a 1-point game. Comes back, it's another one. Third time he comes down, they try doubling him. He dribbles out of the double, even further out, step back, fade off, bang, 3. Just 3 great possessions for him. But, there's the frustrating part too. Is sometimes you saw it on last night. He had 41 points, but he's settling too much. He takes bad shots, all that stuff. I mean, do you have to live with the good and the bad, or is that something that can be rectified?
I think you have to live with the good and the bad to an extent, Mike. He's always going to be around the perimeter at times in a game. It's just the way that the league is played today in order to, open things up for opportunities for some of the other guys. But to me, the Sixers crunch time offense could be really easy. And I think you saw that last night. If you can get the ball to Joel in the post or in the mid post at least, and just let him make decisions, because it's going to be one of two things. They're going to, not double him like the Celtics opted to do a lot of times and just let Ennis freedom, try to guard him one-on-one. And then Joel's going to either get a bucket or get fouled, or they're going to double down. And at this point in his career, he's really good at reading and reacting to that double team and kicking the ball out to shooters, as he, did several times last night. So, if he has to do that for 3 quarters and be around the perimeter and run some of the offense through, DHOs, pick and rolls, things like that, as long as in the crunch time of games and close games, if the Sixers can get him and he's motivated to get that position in the post and they can run the crunch time offense through him down there, I think they'll be, all right moving forward.
Yeah, and then obviously, they didn't have Maxey last night. I mean, you're essentially with no point guard on the roster last night. So for them to get that road win, they looked like a team that understood 3 straight losses, that they needed that game last night. At least the Tobias, Curry, and Embiid were playing with that purpose.
Yeah, and I think for, probably for some of the fans, it's the reason why the team's been, somewhat frustrating this season, because you see a game like that, or the last win before that was, a very impressive win over the best team in the league in Golden State at home last Saturday. You see some impressive wins like that, and then you see some really deflating losses, like the home loss to Miami when they were missing, Jimmy and Bam and half their team. So, it's obviously the Sixers, like every other team right now, we're dealing with absences and injuries and health and safety protocols. But I think it's just a matter of consistency and effort. On some nights, they come out, like last night, you could tell, like you just said, they felt like they needed a win after 3 straight losses. Obviously, playing the Celtics in Boston adds a little bit of fuel to the fire. So I think you just need to see, they need to bring that, attitude that they had last night and that they had in at home against Golden State last week on a more consistent basis.
I know Maxey didn't play last night, but overall, and what we've seen from him, how has his play changed or affected Daryl Morey's standing in what he wants to do with Ben Simmons?
That's a really tough question, because it's been such a small sample size we've seen of Tyrese. I think at the very least, maybe his play, potentially has given pause to what they would want in a return. If you're talking about, previously the primary thing you would think of as in a return for a Ben Simmons package would probably be a point guard, a primary ball handler, throw out a guy like a De'Aaron Fox, for example, something like that. With the way Maxey's come along and developed and looks, extremely promising himself, does that potentially give Daryl and Elton and the rest of the front office pause in terms of being like, hold on, do we want to bring in another similar point guard when this kid potentially could have a ceiling that's equally as high? So, to me, I think it's something, it's tough to say one way or another. I'm not saying I wouldn't trade for a guy like De'Aaron Fox just because you already have Maxey on the roster, but I think it's less of a no-brainer than it was coming into the season, given how quickly and how impressive, Maxey's kind of developed and played this season.
MKB, Michael Kaskey-Blomain from CBS Sports. Michael, do you see a scenario? I don't know where you feel about Ben playing here again. If he does come back, seems doubtful, but could he play with Curry and Maxey and almost serve as a 3? I know he's not going to shoot a whole heck of a lot, but could he play with Harris as, kind of the stretch 4, Maxey taking some of the ball handling away from him, Curry, Ben, and Joel? Is that something that could work?
Yeah, I think theoretically, Mike, because I think that's something that a lot of people have wanted to see with, the Sixers and Ben Simmons for a while, is pair him with another dominant, a point guard, another dominant ball handler, and take him off the ball, let him run more, be a screener, more things like that, a cutter, a slasher. I think it could technically work. Obviously, I don't see any, time soon where he's going to be coming back and playing for the Sixers. But if it ultimately does come down to that, I think him in the starting lineup alongside Maxey and Curry and obviously Joel and Tobias would, provide the spacing that they would need and allow him to not necessarily be in the dominant, ball handler position all the time, which could open him up to, do more things on the offensive end.
Yeah, going back to what you were talking about with Maxey too. I mean, a lot of the trades that we saw seemed to be for guys that were ball dominant scoring type of players. Gilgeous-Alexander, De'Aaron Fox, and you wonder how much, Maxey has changed the look. And if you were trying to get something else, what is that something else?
Yeah, maybe, like a perimeter guy. Obviously, I think Dame Lillard is still the top goal, the top target, if you will. And, no matter how well Maxey has played this season or how high they think his ceiling is moving forward, if Dame becomes available, obviously he's the priority at that position. But, I think there's other guys. Bradley Beal is a name that's popped up recently, given the fact that the Wizards have been struggling. Potentially he wants out. If for some reason a situation where a guy like Zach LaVine wanted out of Chicago, something like that, like a good wing player to complement Maxey and Joel, obviously I think would be the good fit. But, the Sixers could always use depth at the point guard position. And I think whether or not that's like the main goal, I think they'll obviously still look to bring someone back at that spot too.
By the way, real quick, both quarterbacks tonight for Washington did not pass their test. Garrett Gilbert will start tonight for Washington. So there's some news on the Eagles side of things. We're talking with Michael Kaskey-Blomain, covers the Sixers in the NBA for CBS Sports. Michael, where is the NBA now? We saw hockey is pausing. I know Christmas is coming up. You got messes all over the place. I know Adam Silver was just on ESPN TV saying that they don't have any plans to shut down here. So where is the NBA with all the, mess that's happening in other leagues?
Yeah, Mike, I think they're kind of just along for the ride right now. They really do not want to shut the, pause the season, shut it down, especially heading into their Christmas Day slate, which is obviously one of the marquee dates on their calendar. I think Adam Silver pretty much wants to do anything possible to avoid that, which we've already seen with the institution of, new rule. The players have to add a guy through a hardship exception if they have a couple of COVID cases and they're missing guys already, which is, the Sixers just added Tyler Johnson, who's yet to play. But I think they're going to try to just continue to push through. It is damaging the product, I think, a little bit to me. Anytime you watch a game over the past few weeks, it's been, few and far between where one or let alone both of the teams is near full strength. You're seeing a lot of guys that, aren't going to be sniffing playing time come the playoffs that are just, G League call-ups or older veterans that are getting another crack, which is, good for them and it's cool, but I don't think it's great for the, the overall product. But so far, like you said, Adam Silver was just on ESPN right before I hopped on. He hopped on with you, and he basically said that there's no plans for the league to shut down, and they're going to continue to try to push through. Maybe more postponements.
What do you think, Michael, about the way they've kind of handled this by just essentially saying, find a guy off the street. We're not going to have him count against your cap. I mean, the Sixers are bringing Tyler Johnson. I think Miles Powell made his debut in the NBA last night. I just saw Ersan Ilyasova just signed with the Bulls. I mean, they're essentially saying, find a guy, play him, don't cancel.
Yeah, basically, Mike, and that is the message that's clear. And to me, it's just you got to do what you got to do, and it provides a nice opportunity for some of these guys. But watching the games, it does take a little bit away from me. Yeah, I think it hurts the product, and it hurts. It makes it difficult to truly evaluate these teams and things like that. So it's obviously not an ideal situation for anyone right now, and I think the league is just trying to do what they can.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain covers the Sixers. A big win last night. Not forget the standings. Just a nice win for them on the road, shorthanded to get that road win. And the way they get it with Joel Embiid really, saying, hey, give me the ball, jump on my back, let's do this thing. Good to see. We'll see what happens. They've got a interesting schedule coming up. They play the Hawks on Thursday, the Wizards on Sunday. We'll see. They got that game with Brooklyn coming up as well. So we'll see what happens between now and then with the COVID situation. But the Sixers and everybody else, very short-handed in the NBA. And, of course, Merry Christmas to you and everybody out there, Michael, all your friends and family. And we will catch up with you soon.
Thanks, Mike. You too, man. Have a great holiday.
All right. That's Michael Kaskey-Blomain. CBS Sports covers the NBA. And, of course, this hour of the Sports Bash on 97.3 is brought to you by your Delaware Valley Acura dealers with new fresh inventory arriving daily, which is key. Find your Acura today. Check out Acura's award-winning lineup online at DelValAcuraDealers.com. There's a lot of places can't get new inventory arriving daily. MKB breaking it down with what's happened in the NBA. Yeah, Ersan Ilyasova just signed with the Bulls. People basically saying, hey, you want to play? You want to play tonight? Yeah, I got a good run in me. I got one run left in me. All right, when we come back, Sports Bash Live, we got football at 4, Andrew DiCecco. The breaking news on the Washington football team. It is official. The starting quarterback for them tonight will be, I will tell you, coming up next. All right, Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. I'm Mike Gill. The Washington football team will start Garrett Gilbert tonight. Garrett Gilbert completed 21 of 38 passes for 243 yards, a touchdown, and an interception in Dallas's Week 9 loss last year to Pittsburgh. Other than that, he was better than Ben DiNucci. Not very good. Garrett Gilbert played at SMU. And 72 hours ago, he was playing for the New England Patriots. He has 72 hours to learn the Washington playbook, had a rough preseason, completed 56% of his passes. He threw a touchdown in 50 attempts. He got beat out by Cooper Rush to be the backup to Dak Prescott in Dallas. That is why he was on the streets, and he will start the game tonight. Look, it's an unfortunate situation when you really think about it. Fair is fair. This is ridiculous. I mean, what's going on right now? But Tyler Heineke and Kyle Allen, both the starter and the backup, they did not pass the COVID protocols, so they will not make the flight here. And I guess we will hear about other Washington football team players here shortly. John Keim is going to join us at 4:40. I would imagine by that point, you have to have it by 4:00, correct?
Correct. Basically the way it works is the testing timeline, and 4 p.m. was the latest they were allowed to try to maybe scurry somebody in. So
they skirted one in today.
Yeah, Tim Setters, backup D tackle for Washington.
All right. Well, they could use. I mean, I guess they're pretty healthy on the defensive line now. All of a sudden.
Yeah, their D line is nowhere as bad as it was going to be if the game was played on Sunday, which is part of the reason people are upset.
Well, do you remember Garrett Gilbert at SMU?
So I remember Garrett Gilbert very well because Garrett Gilbert started his college career in Texas before he went to SMU, because he was the guy who came in as the freshman when Colt McCoy went down the national championship game against Alabama for Texas. Then he traded SMU later, had a nice college career, but he's been always one of those guys with great talent, but not great ability to execute under pressure.
Okay, well, you better hope that that's the case tonight, because he's getting thrown into the fire here. He'll play Philadelphia. Now, this is where John Gannon becomes key, right? So what does this mean? Let's take a look at this. As we know, John Gannon has not blitzed all that much since he has been the defensive coordinator here. Right. He's done it a little bit more, but you would have to think, hey, man, I've got to go after this Garrett Gilbert, right? You've got to go after this guy, and you better blitz this guy tonight, because how much of this offense does he even really know? That's the thing, is making your progressions, making your reads. You're going to have to do it extra fast. Philadelphia right now in the blitz percentage, blitzes 19% of the time. Second least amount in all of football.
And it's not good, because you know that without Brandon Graham and without some other guys, your blitz and your defense is lacking already because of the guys you're missing. So you need to get creative in these situations.
Right. And the Washington football team, look, Garrett Gilbert, who completed 21 of 38 in the game last year that he played for Dallas, there's no CeeDee Lamb. There's no Amari Cooper. McLaurin's a nice player. I'm not taking anything away from McLaurin. McKissick's a nice player as well.
Out.
Oh, McKissick did not pass?
No, he's injury. That was yesterday. He was ruled out along with Curtis Samuel.
All right, so they're down McKissick now too.
Yeah, so they're without their second and third best pass targets.
And everybody, Jonathan Allen, Montez Sweat, they're both back. That's the two big ones that came back for them.
Correct.
Brandon Sheriff, by the way, their right guard, he is out of the game. So Washington, even with the 2 extra days, they still, I think Sal sent me that text earlier, that they have like 16 guys that are still in peril for this game.
Listen, it's one of those things where, we all know why the schedule was moved, because the NFL was trying to limit the competitive disadvantage going on, and they wanted to get as many guys on the field as possible. And despite what, how frustrating this whole thing is, that's the reality we're living in.
Well, in reality, when you think about it, it's the second game now that got moved, and both of those teams that had to move the games, Cleveland and now Washington, could not get their starting quarterback back on the field.
Along with other players as well. And both Cleveland and Washington were able to get other players back on the field, but not their quarterback. And in Cleveland's case, not their head coach.
Not their head coach, correct. Now, Washington, I'm glad you brought up the coaches, because Washington is missing 6 of their assistant coaches as well.
Correct.
And you might say, so what does that mean? Think about 6 guys who help put the game plan together, 6 guys that have roles on game day, 6 guys that players trust and turn to in those position huddles that are not going to be the voices on game day.
And don't forget about the fact that a lot of the bigger name coaches, your head coach, your coordinators, they lean on those position coaches to do a lot of the legwork during the game. So now that they're not there, that puts more pressure on people who are only available on the sideline now.
I would ask this question, if you're listening out there and you want to get on board, 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. At this point, I don't know what the line changed, if the line changed in this game. I haven't got a chance to look at that, Josh. Maybe you can kind of find that real fast, but you're almost at the point, and I know it sounds odd to say this based on where Philadelphia's expectations were at the beginning of this season, but I think you're pretty close to the point of saying it would be flipping a huge disappointment to lose this game. There's a difference between losing to, hey, we lost to Detroit, we lost to Jacksonville. Yeah, when they're at 100%, they're just, lower level teams. To lose to a team that is now playing their third quarterback, who was here 72 hours, hasn't even been here for 3 days. I mean, you lose this game, this would be more, what would be more disappointing, losing this game or losing that game to the Giants?
Wow. I mean, I would lean toward this game just because the Giants at least had most of their guys in that game. The Washington is without not just the quarterback, not just these coaches, but the vibe of the team's got to be like, man, we're running out there with these dudes. You know what I mean? Like in the locker room, like you walk in the locker room, and you're looking around, you're like, who are these guys?
Well, you're literally, the quarterback has been here for 72 hours.
He wasn't even on the practice squad. They were on someone else's practice squad.
Right. This guy was right. It wasn't like he's been a part of your organization, right, and he just hasn't got the opportunity to play. You had to go outside the organization to find this guy. I got to say, this game to me would be more disappointing to lose than the Giant game.
I agree. By the way, the line is 9.5 now for the Eagles.
So it was 12.5 when I was at FanDuel on Friday.
Right.
And now it's 9.5. It was like 7 yesterday, right?
Remember what happened was on Friday, at one point it got to 10.5 when the more COVID guys got on the list. Then went to 12.5. Then the game got moved. Then went down to 7.5. Now it's up to 9.5.
That line, 9.5.
The line is shuffling.
I feel like this game is one of those games that Philly should win. Like,
by 10
I'm not
points.
giving you my official pick. I'm just saying it feels like they should win like 28-6, 28-9.
Hey, man, we saw the Vikings last night and a Bears team that struggled to score. You're going to tell me the Bears offense is any better than Washington's right now? I don't think so. I think they're about the same.
I mean, they got Mooney. They got McLaurin. You got Gibson here. They don't really have that there.
No.
Montgomery.
Yeah, but he ain't playing that well.
Their defense here is a little better. I mean, you got to imagine 2 turnovers. Gilbert, pencil them in.
That and also the fact that, the offensive line is shaky, so you would assume the Eagles would get after the quarterback. Yeah. I would hope.
Look, this is a game you got to take care of business. This is a kind of one of those nights that say, look, no one thought we could make the playoffs. We're here to go to the playoffs. This is a game we have to have. The percentages go from about 38% of making the playoffs to about 5% if you lose this game tonight. And if you lose this game tonight, for God's sakes, you don't deserve to go to the playoffs. And I know there's this whole we don't even want to go to the playoffs. You want to go to the playoffs. You're in this regular season. You've come this far. You're 500. Everybody's right around the same boat.
Right.
You got 3 first-round picks. Have a successful season. Add to the roster you have. Get this win tonight against Garrett freaking Gilbert. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Call Jenkins and Sons for heating and air conditioning installation service and maintenance, plumbing, or drain cleaning service, 609-641-6262. Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and it is brought to you locally by Caesars Entertainment Group of Atlantic City. Come experience the ultimate sports destination all season long. Wild Wild West, Tropicana, Harrah's Resort, Atlantic City. Book your game day experience today at Caesars.com. The Washington football team has announced their starting quarterback will be Garrett Gilbert. He will be backed up by Kyle Shermer. Andrew DiCecco, football at 4. Let's see what that means for tonight's game. As obviously, Andrew, typically we're breaking down a game. We're getting ready for a game on a Tuesday here. So let's take a look at Philadelphia and Washington. What's going on, man?
Hey, how you doing, Mike?
All right, man. Tuesday night football. Let's break it down. Garrett Gilbert, what do we know? He's played one game for Dallas last year. He lost that game. He's got 72 hours to learn the playbook. What do you anticipate Washington's offense looking like tonight?
A heavy run approach with Antonio Gibson and short dump-offs to the running backs. And I think you're going to see Ricky Seals-Jones, the tight end, become a factor over the middle, and Adam Humphries, their slot receiver, as well.
All right. Obviously, they're very short-handed at the quarterback position. They're also lost Brandon Sheriff, their right guard, up front. Typically, how is the Washington offensive line, and what do you see from them in this particular game?
It's a middling offensive line, which is why I think it's important that Jonathan Gannon keeps his foot on the gas and keeps that aggressive approach, as he's proven to do against teams that have a lackluster offensive line. I think he needs to turn his guys loose up front, and they'll be able to get to Garrett Gilbert and rattle him a little bit. He doesn't have a big arm, and it'll open up opportunities for the secondary to get their hands on the football.
All right, Andrew, obviously, when you take a look at the Washington offense, you talk about a lot of dump-offs and that kind of stuff. They do have Terry McLaurin. How do you anticipate Philadelphia dealing with him? Is that Darius Slay that will kind of walk around, or, follow him around? And do you anticipate Washington trying to get creative and trying to get ways to get McLaurin the ball?
I think they're going to have to find ways to get McLaurin the ball, although I don't know how comfortable Washington's going to be with Garrett Gilbert throwing outside the numbers to McLaurin. You're going to have to try and find a way to get him inside or on the move and those type of things. With a player like Garrett Gilbert, who is very limited and doesn't have a ton, he's only played in 7 NFL games with over 3 different teams. So I think it's going to be a very simplified game plan. I do think that Darius Slay is going to see a lot of Terry McLaurin, and McLaurin really has not provided much of anything on offense. I think he has just 73 receiving yards combined over the past 3 weeks and was blank last week. So that'll be something to watch.
All right. It doesn't sound like, a lot of high expectations for the Washington offense. This is a team that like to run the ball. So Antonio Gibson, do you anticipate, him being able to find running room in the game tonight, or is this a perfect setup for John Gannon? He doesn't like to blitz all that much. So how do you anticipate the Eagles setting up their defense for Gibson?
Well, they're certainly going to try, right? I mean, Antonio Gibson is averaging 21 carries over the past 5 games. I don't know how effective the Eagles are going to be able to bottle him up, because he's a multifaceted runner that can kind of between the tackles. He can create yards outside for a big game on the perimeter. They can also factor in the receiving game as well. He's not a small running back. He's a workhorse style running back. So I think that the offense is going to go through him this week, and they're going to force Garrett Gilbert to beat him with his arm. And then it becomes, the secondary become passive and allow all these short dump offs over the middle in the short to intermediate area and allow them to move the chains. I don't particularly see it, but that's what the Eagles defense is going to try and do in this game.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, football at 4 tonight. We have the game for you live. The coverage begins at 6 o'clock on 97.3 ESPN. Merrill Reese, Mike Quick, they'll have the call at 7 o'clock here. Washington, Philadelphia. We'll talk about how big this game is, but let's look at some of the things on the offensive side for Philadelphia. Jalen Hurts is going to play the game. Would be about 99.9% chance that he does play the game. He has no injury designation, so he would play. With that, is running the football the top option tonight for Philadelphia? Keep it safe, run the ball. Is that the smart thing to do now that Washington has their full complement of defenders back on the front line?
Yeah, they do, but they also have Jalen Hurts, who hasn't played in 3 weeks, and there's a lot of anticipation building up for this matchup. Naturally, the Eagles are going to come out very motivated, having to have their game pushed back a couple of days. So you want to sort of settle the offense in and run the football. That's the remedy to a team that really starts out flat and struggling in the passing game. Get the running game going, establish that early. Even if they're not getting much traction early, I think it behooves them to continue to try and get yards with Miles Sanders and company. And Jalen Hurts needs to rebound from that week. The last time we saw Jalen Hurts, it was against the Giants, and he was very woeful in that game. So he has a lot to prove. But I think that knowing that, we need to sort of ease him into the game flow this particular week.
We haven't seen a lot from Devontae Smith the last couple of weeks here. They got William Jackson, would probably be their top guy because you got Kendall Fuller out. Is this a game where you see Smith getting back and having another kind of big game here? He just has 4 catches, 37 yards his last couple games.
Right. Yeah, he's been a pretty much a non-factor in the past few weeks. So I think that what they need to do is find ways to scheme him open, get him back on track, and ride that so he can ride that momentum wave into the postseason or in the final stretch here. And he's starting to learn. He's having to work through some challenges as far as what teams are going to do to sort of take away both him and Dallas Goddard. And I think he's a talented enough player to overcome that. Now it's just, can the quarterback see the field, deliver the football, and allow routes to develop, because he does get open. Now it's just a matter of finding him and involving him in the game plan consistently and early. But I think that this is the game where he gets back on track.
All right, Andrew, also Goddard. We seem to talk about him a lot. The linebackers of Washington, Dallas Goddard. 16 days. You mentioned it, a long layoff. 16 days since the Eagles last played. The last time we saw Dallas Goddard, it seemed like a month ago. He had a big day, 105 yards against the Jets, a couple touchdowns, but that was with Gardner Minshew throwing the ball. Do you expect that Goddard will have a good matchup tonight against Washington?
I think the offense needs to run through Dallas Goddard. I think it proved against the Jets what a player of his caliber can do, what his ability to take over a game, and he just presents so many different matchup problems both on the outside and ability to work the seams, which I think that is going to be an area in which they can exploit this week against Washington safeties. I don't think they cover particularly well. They are downhill thumper type safeties, but get them in space, and I think that they can be taken advantage of in that regard. So I would expect Dallas Goddard to get vertical on some of these guys, kind of like he did against the Jets. But you gotta involve him. I don't think you should ever see anything less than 6 to 8 targets a game.
One of the things that Andrew does a really good job out for the listeners out there is, the deep guys. You've followed these guys in college, and I know we're going to see a deep guy tonight, and you know a lot about Suopeta. He's probably going to play left guard here. Landon Dickerson likely will not be ready to go. So tell us a little about Suopeta and how that changes the dynamic of that left side of the line. Dickerson and Mailata could be one of the more dominating duos in football, but Opeta, give us a little insight on what you know about him and how that might change the game plan.
Yeah, Suopeta, he was a highly coveted undrafted free agent last season out of Weber State. He's a player that's incredibly strong. I think he had the most bench, the highest bench total at the combine, if I'm not mistaken. He's pretty athletic. He played some tackle at Weber State, and I think he's adjusting, transitioning as a guard in the NFL due to his lack of length. But I think that there's a lot of power there. He struggled a little bit last year when he was inserted in one of the many variations of that offensive line. He got a start or two, and he didn't fare particularly well. But I think that he's really coming in to his own. He really came into his own this summer, and you heard someone like Jason Kelsey rave about him, especially in practice and what they see from him, and as far as his development. And leave it to Jeff Stoutland to really fine tune some of his anyone's weakness. I think that now you would see a vastly improved Suopeta. Should he be the starter this week? I should say. They also have LaRaven Clark. And they just promoted Jack Anderson as well. So we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, I know Opeta has had a couple chances to play.
Go ahead. They activated Jack Anderson.
Correct, yes. Yeah. So, and you mentioned LaRaven Clark as well. The Eagles, this will be the third left guard that they will use. Also, they're on their third right guard. So they are a little depleted at the guard spots. But one of the things, Andrew, that last year brought this team is they got a lot of experience. Opeta, Herbig, Driscoll. They weren't, as a collective unit last year, the line may have been not so good. But those guys getting a lot of playing time, I think it's really carried over and helped this year's team out.
Yeah, that's why you're not seeing the offensive line really bleed as much this season, because these guys have gotten their experience. As I've said on your show multiple times, and as I've written about as well, just getting that experience really has helped, has really benefited this unit this year. So even if they did suffer a rash of injuries or even COVID-related absences, they're built to withstand that, at least in the interim, with the guys that they have.
All right, a lot of things to kind of look at in this game. And, one area where the Eagles, you question sometimes is their linebacking core. This is a game where you mentioned dump-offs, little stuff out of the backfield, Gibson, TJ Edwards, Alex Singleton. How do you see that matchup for Philadelphia? You anticipate that Washington is going to try to make them a big part of this game?
Yeah, in my scouting report on InsideTheBirds.com, I actually listed TJ Edwards as my X factor because Washington is going to look to establish the running game early, because Antonio Gibson is a physical downhill runner, and I think someone like him, like TJ Edwards, really needs to show some physicality at the point of attack and really shut down those running lanes. And he's also going to be tested moving laterally sideline to sideline on these dump-offs and tracking a tight end like a Ricky Seals-Jones, who's pretty athletic. Alex Singleton as well. Alex Singleton has proven to be a liability, at least especially in the early part of the season against the run. So those are two guys I would expect the Washington football team to attack pretty regularly in this matchup.
Yeah, by the way, just to reiterate what you said, the Eagles did activate Jack Anderson from the IR. That means Landon Dickerson and Andre Dillard both not cleared from the COVID list to play. And Dillard obviously is the backup left tackle should something happen to Jordan Mailata. So that's why Dillard being out makes a little bit of news here. Jack Anderson, as you mentioned, was the guy they got, from Buffalo?
Buffalo.
Buffalo,
yeah,
right.
Buffalo.
So LaRaven Clark is a guy to keep an eye on. Sue Opeta gets the start tonight. And Brandon Sheriff out for Washington. How does that affect them?
In a big way. That's their best offensive lineman.
All right, Andrew. Obviously, we got playoff implications here. Philadelphia enters with about a 37% chance to make the playoffs. Washington, a little bit less than that. The loser of this game, Philadelphia, drops down to about 5% and Washington to 8%. So obviously it looks like we have almost an elimination feeling game tonight. Do you look at this game in that ilk? Is that this is essentially an elimination game based on the fact, too, that Minnesota won last night?
Right, Minnesota won, the Saints won, the Niners won. So, I mean, that really the margin for error is so minute this week that whoever loses this game really faces an uphill climb to get to the playoffs, even given that it still would be feasibly up for grabs. I really don't foresee any team really, whoever loses this, as being viable playoff contenders. So this has that must-feel win sort of cloud looming over this game,
yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, and how much did New Orleans beating Tampa really cloud things? I think most people kind of looked at New Orleans as kind of out of this thing, and then they go and beat Tampa, and then all of a sudden, not only are they in it, they've got a great path to go. I mean, they got Miami. It's going to be a tough game on Monday night, and they got Atlanta and Carolina. So, I mean, it feels like the New Orleans win over Tampa really changed the dynamics of this wild card race.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair assessment. I mean, it threw a wrench into everything. I don't think anyone ever saw that happening, but obviously this has been a strange year in the NFL. We've seen a lot of teams that we sort of perceived as NFL titans, so to speak, fall to inferior opponents, and it's really hard to sort of navigate through when you're looking at the playoff picture. But I would say that the Saints are in a good position to really make some noise here, and they have. I'm not sure what Jameis Winston's status is, but I mean, if he's able to return, or even with Taysom Hill, they have. He presents a lot of matchup issues as a quarterback. They can run, and he's a very limited passer, but teams still have to prepare for that aspect of his game as being an explosive, dynamic type of player back there. So and their defense is really strong. So
Andrew DiCecco, football at 4, InsideTheBirds.com, DiCecco NFL. It's been one of the more bizarre games we've ever prepared for. I mean, typically, Tuesday, we'll look back at the game on Sunday. Thursday, Andrew's back. We'll start to look at the matchups. And when you're looking at the matchups for this one, we still really don't know a whole heck of a lot of stuff here. It is one of the tougher games to ever break down. But with that being said, you're starting Garrett Gilbert in essentially a playoff game here. What would be a more disappointing loss, to lose this game or the one against the Giants a couple of weeks ago?
I would say this one, given the nature of just the sheer depletion of the Washington football team, just the fact that you're coming off a bye week. You said a 16-day reprieve of not playing any football. You should go in there fresh. The Eagles are the healthier team. They're the better team. So to fall to a Garrett Gilbert-led team in a must-win situation would be incredibly deflating, given all the variables surrounding this game.
All right, give us your view of how this game's going to go down and how you see what happens tonight at Lincoln Financial Field.
Well, I kind of see the Eagles getting off to a fast start. I think they're going to run the football. I think they're going to do a lot of short to intermediate passing game with Dallas Goddard. I think they're going to get out to an early lead, kind of like we saw against the Jets. And I think that the plan is get a lead, and then you're able to unleash your defensive line on the quarterback, create some turnovers. And I think this is going to be a double-digit victory for the Eagles. I have them winning 31-13.
All right, 31-13, double digits, right about where I said a little earlier today. I'll give you my official pick coming up a little bit later on in the show. Andrew DiCecco is back on Thursday, as we'll kind of look a little bit at this one, and then got to get right back ready for the Giants, as the Philadelphia Eagles will take on the Giants on Sunday. You'll hear Washington and Philly tonight at 7, and, of course, Philly and New York on Sunday. Both games right here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Andrew, enjoy the game tonight, man.
All right, man. Talk to you later.
All right, that's Andrew DiCecco, InsideTheBirds.com, football at 4, and it is brought to you by Caesars Entertainment Group of Atlantic City. Come experience the ultimate sports destinations all season long at the Wild Wild West, Tropicana, and Harrah's Resort Atlantic City. Book your game day experience today at Caesars.com. Well, it's official. The Eagles will be facing Garrett Gilbert tonight when they host the Washington football team. Both starter Tyler Heineke and backup Kyle Allen failed to clear the COVID protocols. They will not make the trip to Philadelphia, meaning Gilbert gets the start. He will be backed up by Kyle Shermer. Gilbert was with Dallas last season. He makes his second career start after being signed by Washington just 3 days ago. His only start for Dallas, he was 21 of 38 for 243 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. In his only other start in Week 9 last season in a game against Pittsburgh. Gilbert was with Dallas this preseason. He completed 56% of his passes with just 1 touchdown and 50 pass attempts. He will now start for Washington in a very important game tonight. Very interesting. He will be backed up by Kyle Shermer. Couldn't think of his first name. It's one of those things where obviously 2 weeks almost, the Eagles have not played. They had the bye. You had 2 weeks to get ready for the game. Then it's pushed back. There's not much more you can really break down and say about this game. There has been some changes. Dickerson will not play. Gilbert is in. Those are 2 major changes. I think Andrew's right. Washington is just, to me, outmanned in this game. It would be as disappointing a loss as I can think of for Philadelphia. If they lost this game, it would be one of the most disappointing losses that I can remember. Sports Bash is live on 97.3 ESPN. And that includes the Giant game this year, the Miami game that they lost 2 years ago. This would be worse. If they come in tomorrow and they lost this game, this is probably the worst loss that I can remember. Sports Bash live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. John Keim in 19 minutes gives us the Washington point of view coming up. 426 Tuesday. My days are all messed up because football's on every day now. Is there a way that the NFL could balance the schedule out that they could play almost every day? Like, could they do it where they play Tuesday nights where both teams are coming off of a bye and then they would be on the short week again, but teams play Thursday, Sunday, Thursday. You're just going short week the opposite direction. Is there a way that they could figure that out?
Well, sure. I mean, you could stagger everybody's schedules.
Right, but I'm saying, like, you would have to do it where the two teams that play on Tuesday would have to be coming off a bye. You can't play Sunday, Tuesday.
Correct.
So you would have to get two teams every time coming off of a bye.
Correct. And there's probably a way you could do that. Also, you could have a team that plays on, for example, on a Tuesday, then the next week they play on a Monday.
Yeah.
You could do that.
Could do that. Play Tuesday and then again on Monday. So you're coming off a bye, you play Tuesday, and then your next game's not again until Monday. It's not a bad idea. Got to figure out whether they can do it to where, all right, like if you were looking, I guess maybe you couldn't have Tuesday night football all season long.
Maybe not, but I'm sure there's a way they could, make it work, like I said, because if you stagger the schedule, and as you know, somebody pays enough money for it.
Well, what would you rather then? The doubleheader Monday game? Do you like the doubleheader Monday?
If it's not 5 o'clock.
What was wrong with 5 o'clock?
Well, the only good thing about it was for us.
That's exactly what I liked about it. There was nothing else that I liked about it other than it helped us out. If every week they told you games at 5 o'clock, 5 and
8,
5 and 8:30.
You'd be okay with that.
Why not?
I'd be interested.
I mean, I don't care about the Thursday night game. I don't need a Thursday night game. I've been asking for give me 2 games. Either give me 2 games on Monday or give me a weekly 9 a.m. game.
See, I'm so used to there being a Thursday night game. I'm just like, whatever.
I'm used to it, but I honestly, I don't get jacked up for it. I'm not like, yes, I got a game tonight. I used to enjoy the Thursday night college game, which has kind of got pushed down the toilet. Used to get really good Thursday night college games. You used to get, Rutgers, Louisville. You had that Big East package on Thursday nights. You had those when Rutgers was pretty good.
Now the Thursday night game is some rando that didn't make it on the good schedule.
Yeah, the Thursday night college game has kind of just dissipated, and they've got because of the NFL. I mean, who wants to go up against that? But there was a lot of people who suggested that they move these games because they wanted to see how Tuesday night games would do.
Would you rather have Tuesday or Thursday night then?
It's a good question. I think I guess I would rather have Tuesday.
Is it just because you feel like Thursday is just so unnecessary at this point? Or do you feel like Tuesday's at least closer to Sunday and it's more like part of the bigger deal?
I don't know that I've ever thought about it. I'm just saying Tuesday because it's like Monday, you get Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Thursday, you get a game, and then you get a break. There's a breakup again. Because then once you get a game on Thursday, you're kind of like, oh, I like another game. But then you have nothing.
Right.
And then Saturday, if you're a college fan, but at least if you had a Tuesday game, then you're getting Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. There's no Wednesday game. I don't need a Wednesday game.
No, we have the Maction for that.
See, Thursday is the NBA night. Now, the NBA has got off Thursday because of Thursday Night Football.
Correct.
They used to do Thursday, and then they decided we'll wait until football's over. So even TNT doesn't do their big Thursday games.
They do more Tuesday during the football season.
Right. They moved their stuff to Tuesday. I mean, I tweeted this out this morning. It stinks to hear that your team's game got moved. On Sunday, when your team's not playing, it stinks even worse. But on Tuesday, when you're like, I got a game tonight, now you're like, this is kind of cool.
It's cool for everyone except for who bought tickets.
Yeah, a buddy of mine, he was like, hey, I got lower level Eagles tickets. Do you, if I want to go? And I'm like, I can't make that. I get off at 6. By the time I get up there with the traffic up there is going to be like. Now, the Flyers game getting canceled tonight did kind of cut into that.
It does open the door a little bit for less.
Yeah,
traffic
but still,
anxiety.
it's going to be a bleep show up there.
Oh, of course it is.
I want no part of driving up to Philly tonight to go to the game. Now, I'm not the guy who complains about the cold weather. I don't care if it's cold. I'll dress warm. That's easy. So that's not my problem.
I
But
feel like just the timing of it's more of a problem.
7:00 on Tuesday's tough.
Very tough.
I mean, most people get done at 5. I don't get out till 6.
That's what I was saying to somebody earlier. Like the fact that the Browns game yesterday was at 5:00.
Yeah, that was. I didn't see.
yikes.
What was the attendance like there? I mean, I saw it later.
I saw the highlights and it was sparse.
Yeah, I was just saying I didn't pay a lot of attention to it. I probably should have.
I mean, I almost listened to the game exclusively on the radio because I was, just doing stuff here in the studio.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, I would imagine the place is going to be full tonight, though.
I mean,
I
it
don't
was
think I don't
funny-
think the Eagles fans are going to. Of all the fan bases of getting the game changed and having problems, I think Philly would be one of the least.
probably. By the way, it was funny last night because on the call was Scott Graham and Ross Tucker. And, Scott Graham and Ross Tucker also do the Eagles preseason games on TV.
That's right.
Well, they were joking about the fact that they're like, well, we have a lot of experience with Nick Mullins.
That's right. Mullins was here, right?
Yeah, he was in Philly. So
It seems like ages ago that Nick Mullins was here.
it was just so funny. Listen to them. We're like, well, I remember Nick Mullins did that in a game.
Just
earlier
think
this
about
year.
how long ago that, like when they signed Nick Mullins, it was like, oh, they got a veteran guy who's a backup who can win you games. And it's amazing how things have changed from that moment where they upgraded their backup position to Gardner Minshew. I mean, who knows if Nick Mullins would have been the quarterback 2 weeks ago against the Jets. I'm not saying they would have lost that game, but
Certainly possible.
yeah.
You got to realistically consider the fact that Gardner Minshew was that much of an upgrade.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and I like the people. I think this would be one of the most disappointing losses that I can think of. But I like the people who will be like, if you lose to this team, you don't deserve. Does Arizona then deserve to be in the playoffs because they lost to Detroit?
Well, according to those team people, no.
Exactly. They sound like idiots. Like, you sound like a buffoon when you're the person that's like, you don't deserve to get into the playoffs if you lose it. This is the NFL. Are you not smart enough to realize that in the NFL, people can never predict what's going to happen? Jacksonville beats – who did Jacksonville beat this year? That was like an upset. Like they're not beating each other most of the time. I mean, Houston did beat Jacksonville last week. But most of these teams have gotten wins against teams that were like, they're going to look back on. Tennessee lost to who?
The Jets.
They're going to look back at that loss. They lost to the freaking Jets. So I love the people who are like, if you lose
Bills,
this.
they beat the Bills.
They beat the Bills. Look where the Bills are right now. You think the Bills at 8-6 would love to have a Jacksonville win under their belt right now? So if we took every team that had a bad loss this year and said, well, you don't deserve to make the playoffs if you lose this game tonight. Right? You sound like a complete jackass.
You sound like an imbecile, yeah.
You really do.
It's so funny the way that voice was great.
It would be disheartening as hell. And if you lost that game to the Giants a couple of years ago, they lost that game to Miami, and the same people would say, well, you don't deserve to make the playoffs because you lost to Miami. They won 4 in a row, and they made the playoffs. And then they won a playoff game, for God's sakes.
With the backup quarterback.
The NFL is the most unpredictable thing that I've ever been a part of. Ever.
That's why you love it, right?
It's what makes it interesting is we go through the schedule. Oh, they're playing this team. They're not beating them. And then you lose. Nobody thought that New Orleans was beating Tampa the other night.
Right.
Nobody. New Orleans was written off. They were done. I said this to Andrew. New Orleans beating Tampa has really changed the complexion of the wild card race because now they're not only in it, they're a favorite. Sports Bash Live. When we come back, we'll get the Washington side of things. Just how bad is it? John Keim, ESPN.com's NFL Nation, joins us on the other side. I hope you will too. This is the Sports Bash. All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Excuse me. John Keim covers the Washington football team, ESPN.com. As we'll ask John what position he plans on playing tonight for the Washington football team as they get ready to take on Philadelphia. This has got to be, John, one of the more bizarre games that you've had to cover, I would imagine. You've covered this team for a long time, but not knowing who the starting quarterback will be a couple of hours before the game has to be right up there with one of the more bizarre situations, even for Washington.
you have to qualify it by including that last part, that even for Washington, yes, it's very odd. Although, as you know, with quarterbacks here, it's been bizarre for the last 30 years. So this is just like, oh yeah, okay, but it's because of all that's going on, and like, are these guys going to be cleared, from the COVID list at this time? And like, you're waiting all day to see if guys are going to test negative, and it is bizarre. And then, because the thing with Gilbert, like, he just got here. He was signed on Friday. So Garrett Gilbert is going to start, and you only have had 3 practices and probably a total of 3.5 hours worth of practices too, because it's not like they were going hard in those days because so many guys were out. So it is a bizarre situation. And somebody texted me, is like, have fun at the 4th preseason game tonight. I said, this feels more like an AAF All-Star game.
The AAF, yes. Who forgets the AAF? John Keim, ESPN.com NFL Nation reporter, covers Washington. In the 72 hours that Gilbert's been there, what have you found out about him? Do you know anything about the guy? Have you got a chance to speak to him? Has he spoken? Do you know anything?
He talked to us the day he got here, so that was Friday. So what we know is he was giving his daughter a bath when he got a call from Washington on Thursday night, and he was on a plane shortly thereafter, and then Friday was his first day. What I know is that he has experience in this offense, and that's why he's got experience in this offense, plus he has started a game in the NFL, and that is why he started tonight over Kyle Shermer, who has been with the team on the practice squad all season. So, he played 2 years under Washington's offensive coordinator, Scott Turner, when they were both in Carolina in 17 and 18. So that helps. And his starting experience is 1 game against Dallas last year. But that 1 game is enough for Ron Rivera to say, I'm going to trust this guy instead, even though he just got here. And what I think one thing that helped is, where those 2 extra days helped him, was he got a little bit more time with guys around him, but the coaches saw maybe a little bit more what plays maybe are better for him or what might not work for him. So there's at least a little bit more knowledge in that regard. We're not talking a big sample size here, but there's at least a little bit more knowledge.
John Keim covers the Washington football team. Where else? They had 21 guys out. Do we have, I guess by 4 o'clock you had to, but do you know who's able to return of the 21?
So, there's now 13 on the list. So they've actually whittled it. It's been pared down. Then there's also 7 assistant coaches. So, but 13 players on the list. So they have their entire defensive line is back, except for Chase Young, who is on IR with the torn ACL. But him aside, everybody else who's a top lineman is back. So they got, John Allen is back. Matt Ioannidis is back. Montez Sweat is back. And then they had James Smith-Williams and Casey Toohill, who was with Philly last year for a little bit. But they're back too. And they were starting at ends when Sweat and Young were out. And so they have all 4 defensive tackles back. So they're in good position with their defensive line. But where they're missing is two of their starting defensive backs, Cam Curl, safety, and Kendall Fuller, corner. Those are pivotal losses. They're missing Brandon Sheriff, their all-pro right guard, pivotal loss because their center is Keith Ismail, who is their 4th starting center this year. And so now you're going to have he's a second-year guy, so he's not an experienced guy. So you're going to have 2 guys on the right side, the center and the right guard, who are going to be inexperienced. So that's where they could have some issues. And of course, quarterback.
Yes, obviously they're on their 3rd guy with the top 2 quarterbacks, Allen and Heineke, both not able to play tonight. Sheriff, you mentioned. Yet this is a monster game if you want to be the 7th seed. The winner of this game is firmly there. In fact, Washington would be there at the end of the night.
Right.
What does a loss mean for these 2?
Well, for Washington, it would be certainly for Washington, it'd be devastating because now you're 6-8. Then you'd have 3 teams ahead of you at 7-7, right? And then you have to go on the road to play Dallas. The only way you have a chance to get in is probably by winning your last 3 games. I think a couple of weeks ago, there was some thought that a team might get in at 8-9, and could they do it? But it just looks like the way the Saints are playing, Vikings keep kind of hanging around, that one of those teams will get to 9 wins, or the Eagles will get to 9 wins. And so you're not going to get in at 8-9. So I think it'd be a really, really big loss for either team if that happens. So, yeah.
I was on the air Friday, and, typically we've got our regular show Friday, Sal Palantonio, Adam Kaplan. We break down the game. We give it. This has been one of the most bizarre games because you don't know the matchups. You don't know anything until about 4 o'clock today. But this is a team in Washington. Now, you see them all the time. That, from I'm observing, they like to run the ball when they were winning. The last 4 games before they played Dallas, they seem that they wanted to run the ball. You mentioned the line issues.
Yeah.
But the quarterback issue. So what is their game plan in a game like tonight?
You're going with a guy who, again, just for all I said about him earlier, he started 1 game. You have to run the ball, and they know that. The hard part is without Sheriff there, and can you, not like it's only about Brandon Sheriff, but can you generate a run game without the help of your best lineman? The benefit for them is that that Terry McLaurin will play. He had a concussion last week, but he'll play. That's good news for them. They should have all their healthy tight ends will be out there. That helps. But they don't have their third down back, J.D. McKissick. That's a big blow. So, I don't know what you're going to do in the pass game. So you're going to have to get the run game going. But guess who else knows that? The Eagles. Like, if I'm the Eagles, I'm just going to load up on the box and okay, Garrett Gilbert, beat us with your arm. Can you do that? I just think that's going to be awfully difficult. So you're going to have to play. Really what you have to hope for Gilbert is he doesn't turn it over, and that they're able to move the ball enough to play a field position game and hope that the defense can put you in a position to maybe pull one out. That's what you have to hope.
It's amazing that this game has this much importance. This is a Washington team that had been playing really well before the loss to Dallas, and it just feels like it's such a weird scenario. What was, the 72 hours like for Washington? I know here in Philly, they weren't very happy. They followed the protocols.
Yeah, we heard.
Yep, they weren't happy. They're essentially healthy. Now, they did lose Landon Dickerson, who I don't think would have played if the game had been on Sunday. But what was it like over the last 72 hours with this team? More trying to figure out who's going to play, trying to find players to play. I opened by saying this has to be one of the most bizarre 72 hours cover the team, even for Washington. But take us kind of behind what was going on to get that team ready to be in Philadelphia tonight.
Right. And, they have been spending a lot of time. Like, one thing Ron Rivera told us the other day is that how much time he has had to spend, because he's also basically their de facto GM, he's in charge of he's in charge. And so he had to spend a lot of time going over a list of available players just in case, because it's not just the guys you had on the list. It's like, who else might you lose? Mm-hmm. That's the other big thing. So they had to be ultra prepared for that. And then just trying to look at practice squad teams and say, okay, who would be a good fit to come in right now and play possibly? And so you spent a lot of time doing that, but they were able to get 2 more practices in. They weren't, long practices, probably, like I said, probably about an hour each. And I don't know how much it really helped them in the end, because they got Matt Ioannidis back because they waited the extra days, but they lost Brandon Sheriff because they had the extra day. And so in the end, as far as that goes, it didn't really help them that much. But it did give them a couple of days with Gilbert. And the thing is, I know that people up here are talking about the protocols. Nothing has I'm not trying to be an apologist for this team, but I don't think it was as simple as they weren't following protocols, because almost all their guys that are on this list are vaxxed. There's a couple who aren't, Montez Sweat, but I think the assumption from things I heard and read in Philly was that Montez Sweat brought it in, and he wasn't in the building when this started to break out. Right. So I'm not saying they did follow it. I can't say they didn't. I don't know, was it bad luck, or, was it a case of a small building where people are right on top of you that it just breaks out like that?
Yeah.
Or were they not following protocols? I can't say that. It may have been. I don't know, but I can't say one way or another for sure.
And I don't know if it's specifically, Philly saying it's Washington's fault. It's just, hey, this is the whole league. What we were told at the beginning of the league, everybody flipped it upside down, and they moved this game. And now as you just kind of said, Washington's not in a much better position today than they would have been on Sunday, correct?
No, no, they're not. And I think the funny thing is it may have helped Jalen Hurts a lot. But you don't know that. Like if I'm an Eagles fan, I'd have been annoyed too. I think Washington fans would have been annoyed if it was on the other foot.
It doesn't help that the Eagles are coming off of a bye and they haven't had a game in 16 days.
That's a long time. That's a long layoff. And plus, you are gearing up for it, and it is a long layoff. And, the one benefit this team had is that last year they had to kind of go through the same thing when they played at Pittsburgh, and it got moved from a Sunday to a Monday. And then they had a short week going out west the next week, and they end up winning both those games. So I think they can kind of draw upon that experience of how you need to handle things. And they have you have an experienced coach with it. So, but, who knows how the impact is, right? And, I don't know. It's, it's a crazy situation. And
real quick, John, how much? There's also 6 assistant coaches that are not going to be there tonight, and people don't even think about that aspect of what that means.
Yeah, that's huge, because now you have the defensive line coaches out, the running backs coaches out, the receivers coaches out. The one benefit is that all the coordinators are there, so that I think that helps. The play callers are there. I think it would have been harder, if Scott Turner couldn't go. He's the offensive coordinator. Who's now you're having somebody else call plays plus coach. If the defensive coordinator's not there, Jack Del Rio's not there, how are you handling that? So that's where they're fortunate. But you're losing it's in game. Now, fortunately for them, they have assistants who can step up.
Yeah.
And that helps. And these are coaches, because one of them is a female, Jennifer King, who will take over for running backs coach Randy Jordan. But she's been there all year. She knows these guys. She knows what they're supposed to do. But you're taking on extra duties during the game because they all had duties before. Now you're doing double duty. So, it's not an ideal situation when you're trying to make a playoff run. And then you couple it with the fact that the Eagles are playing well. This is a good team. I mean, they found their formula, and I think it would be a good matchup if they both were healthy and right, because I think, what the Eagles like to do is run the ball. These guys, can stop the run. I think that'll still be interesting, but I think it would have been a fun matchup, because I just think there's some similarities there. And but the Eagles are playing really well, and they found their formula, and it's going to be tough for this team to stop them in this situation.
You'll hear it here on 97.3 ESPN. John Keim covers the Washington football team as they get ready to take on Philadelphia with some sort of team. We'll see what unfolds at Lincoln Financial Field. John, we always appreciate catching up with you, man.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, and always enjoy it. Happy holidays.
Absolutely. John Keim, and of course, Philly and Washington meet in 2 weeks. We'll get to talk to John again when the Eagles head down to FedEx Field. And apparently they are trying to get a new FedEx Field. I'll give you the details on that coming up a little bit later. But when we come back, one thought every game, Casey Joyner, don't go away. Sports Bash here on a Tuesday. We got Eagles and the Washington football team. If you've lived under a rock, the game was moved. It'll be tonight, 7 o'clock. We'll have it for you live on 97.3 ESPN. I'm your host, Mike Gill. Casey Joyner. One thought every game. He'll join us in just a moment here on the Sports Bash. Get some thoughts on the matchup. It's hard to break this matchup down because you don't know who's playing. We have a better idea now. John Keim, ESPN.com, was kind enough to join us to give us some of the updates. Sports Bash is brought to you by Matt Blatt Nissan. The all-new Matt Blatt's now open on the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township, next to Home Depot. Online, mattblattnissan.com. We will go through one thought on every game that happened on Sunday, Monday, and then preview the two Tuesday games. Because remember, there is two games tonight. Now, they both are happening concurrently. They are not happening staggered. So when the Eagles kick off at 7, the Seattle and the Rams game will be kicking off at 7, which I guess will be 4 on the West Coast. I don't know why they decided to do both games at 7 o'clock Eastern time. It seemed like you could have the perfect situation again where you could have played a 7 and a 10 and had 2 football games on Tuesday night here. I don't know. It seemed like it would have been the smart thing to do, but for whatever reason. I think the Seattle Rams game is intriguing because of this. Seattle wins. They are still alive in the wild card race. And that to me seems like a team that you do not want to be in the wild card race. You want to get that team out. Russell Wilson. I don't want Russell Wilson to be hanging around the wild card race. But tonight they play the Rams. The Rams are pretty good. They're playing for a piece of the NFC West prize. So there is some reason for the Rams to step up and play this game in a precarious situation. So all of that is the backdrop for tonight. Philadelphia and Washington is obviously a monster game for a couple of reasons. One, Philadelphia loses the game. Their percentages of making the playoffs drop down to 5%, according to the ESPN FPI numbers. So a loss tonight, and you would essentially have to win out. Now, winning out isn't, I mean, you got the Giants on Sunday. Got Washington again, but if you can't beat this version of Washington, I'm not saying you couldn't win again, because as we know in the NFL, it's any Sunday. If you lose to the Washington football team this week, it wouldn't shock me if you went down there and beat them in 2 weeks. Just, it's football. It's what it is. But then you would definitively have to beat Dallas no matter what. And it is becoming increasingly more obvious that that Dallas game is going to mean something. In fact, think about this, Eagles fans. If the Eagles do, in fact, make the playoffs, as currently constructed, if Philadelphia makes the playoffs right now, they would play Dallas in week number 1 of the playoffs, because Dallas is the 2. Philadelphia is going to be no better than the 7. So it could be a big, big game in week 18. But let's look at what we have here. Week 15, Washington, Casey Joyner from The Athletic and the Philadelphia Inquirer. One thought on every game. We had John Keim, who covers Washington, on about 20 minutes ago.
Yep.
Sal Powell was on Friday. Adam Kaplan does his Friday hit. I don't know that there's been a more bizarre matchup situation. So, Casey, we finally know who's playing quarterback for Washington. All those conversations, we had no idea. What do we know about Garrett Gilbert?
We know about Garrett Gilbert. Not a whole lot, to be honest, because he's just not a lot of metrics and tape to go on for him. I mean, you're talking a third-string quarterback coming into this sort of situation. I just posted something. I'm working the Athletics live blog. Sorry, it's a couple minutes late. I was caught up in a couple things there. And you're looking at the metrics of the people he's going to have to throw against and such. I mean, he's not just coming to a tough situation where he's got to take over as quarterback. He's coming to a tough situation where he's got a very good defensive team on the road with a lot of other situations too. So I feel bad for him because I think he get as bad of a night as some of the quarterbacks said yesterday.
Let's take a look at some of the matchups here. Sheriff's out. They're on like their fourth center here. What does the Washington offensive line look like against Philadelphia's defensive front?
It's a working. I think they're going to have to simplify some of their game plan. When you get backup offensive linemen and a lot of the things, if you're playing zone defense, you get those linemen in. There are certain types of rules in rule blocking where, okay, you've got to block this guy based on this type of front, and you can do a lot of adjustments to that. And that can make for difficulty if you've got your new lineman coming in. But there are some simple approaches you can take to say, okay, well, this is what we're going to do with that. So I would think that they would just try and simplify some of the approaches. I think we'd see a lot of basic inside zones. I think outside zones are going to be tougher for them to run. So I think that they will probably simplify the game plan from that perspective. But I think that's where they're going to be entirely as an offense, that you're just not going to be able to get too complex in anything you do tonight. And you're going to want a grinded out kind of game. It's exactly what you want to get into, is a grinded out kind of game. I think it'll impact the way they approach their things defensively too, because if you're going to play that type of game of offense, you may just decide to invite Philadelphia to run the ball. And I know Philly's been doing a great job of that. But if you're Washington, I'd rather get a game where we only have maybe 7 or 8 possessions on each side rather than try and get, 10 to 12 possessions, because then I've got a little less to worry about as far as, how many things can go wrong for our team.
Well, we know backup quarterback, really third quarterback, who's been here for 72 hours, banged up offensive line. That means guys like McKissick, who's hurt, Logan Thomas, who's hurt. They would have been big factors here. So with those guys out, who do they kind of turn to offensively, their game plan here? Do they just stick with the run? Do they try to say, hey, we're going to get Adam Humphries, get you involved, Ricky Seals-Jones, the tight end? Who's the guy, if you're Philadelphia, that you're watching out for under these scenarios?
If I'm Washington, if I'm Philadelphia and I'm Washington both, the one matchup that I'm trying to get, if I want to make a big play, because obviously they'll lean, they're going to lean a lot in the ground game. They're going to lean a lot on Antonio Gibson. So, that's who they're going to go with. But if I'm trying to make a play in the passing game, I'm going to go after Avonte Maddox and see what matchup I can get there. Because since week 11, per True Media, Maddox has been targeted 18 times, allowed 13 completions. That's a 72% completion rate. That's terrible. For 158 yards, 8.8 yards per target, and 2 plays at 20 or more yards allowed. It's pretty much the worst metrics in the Philadelphia secondary, because Nelson and Slay and Harris, they all have really good metrics for the Eagles over the past 4 games or the past 4 weeks. But Maddox has been a troublesome person for them. So I would love, if I'm Washington, to try to get, if I could find a way to get McLaurin on Maddox and say I could get a play there, then I might let Gilbert just air it out a couple of times and hope I hit a big play. Because if you're Washington, you're hoping if you can get 1 or 2 big plays in the passing game that could keep 1 or 2 of your drives going, then that might be enough if your defense holds up to keep this thing competitive.
Crazy. On the other side, let's look at Jalen Hurts is going to play. He is not no injury designation for him. They want to run the ball. No Landon Dickerson, though, tonight. Suopeta is going to step into that spot, but is still running the football the way to go for Philadelphia. Their offensive line up against, now, on Friday, if we were having this conversation, we would be saying a depleted Washington front four. They have been replenished up front.
They have, and it's going to be trouble because over the past 4 weeks, again, measuring that same measurement per True Media, Washington has allowed to opposing running backs. So that takes quarterbacks out of the equation, but opposing running backs, they've allowed 61 rushes, 227 yards, only 3.7 yards per rush, 1 rushing touchdown. I do these measurements for fantasy football for some of the articles I do for The Athletic. And from a fantasy football perspective, that would be the 4th lowest points per game. So if you translate that to standard football, it just says, look, this is a very tough team to go run against. And the Eagles have a string of 6 straight games at 175 more yards. And I did a part of that in an article. I believe that's only the 6th time, it's the 8th time that's happened since the NFL AFL merger. I think the last time it happened was with the 85 Bears. They're on a streak that's just rare historically. I would think that this is the kind of matchup, if Washington plays like it's been playing, that I don't think the Eagles are going to be able to count on getting 175 yards on the ground. And if you're only getting 125 yards on the ground, let's say, or 105, whatever it is, if you're getting a much lower number out of that back, then that means you're going to have to look elsewhere to get some big plays in your offense.
All right, I'm interested, because the last time we saw Dallas Goddard, he had 105 yards. He was really the focal point of that Eagle offense against the Jets. Now, that was Gardner Minshew. Do you anticipate there'll be room to roam for the tight end in this particular game?
Well, I can't if you're going to mention Goddard, you have to check out the Eagles Twitter feed, because he came to the stadium dressed up looking like Will Ferrell from Elf. So he's in the holiday spirit. Washington, last 4 weeks, they're only allowing to opposing tight ends 12 completions in 20 attempts, 136 yards, 6.8 yards per attempt, 1 touchdown and 1 interception. They would be 11th in those rankings for tight end production over the last 4 weeks, 11th best. So it's not going to be a matchup you're going to want to go after. If I'm looking at matchups to go after, if I'm looking at, say, okay, what does Philadelphia want to get in the passing game? There are some places they can go. I would look at Bobby McCain, who said to fill in that he's been a multiplayer for them, for Washington in the secondary. He's allowed 6 completions and 9 attempts for 14.4 yards per target. He'd be somebody to go after. None of their cornerbacks, none of their defensive backs outside of Kendall Fuller have been shut down. They've had solid but not great metrics. So I think this is a game where you let whatever the play call is develop out. But I'll give you one place where Washington has struggled. They 20th in fantasy production allowed on vertical passes over the past 4 weeks. So they're not very good there. So if I'm the Eagles, I'm thinking this might be a game where I want to see Hurts go vertical and see who we can get involved in that area, because I think there are going to be a couple passes where they can go, because Washington's going to be so fired up to stop the run.
And depleted as well. No Fuller in the secondary for them. Also, one of their safeties is out as well, as John Keim told us. They are banged up big time there. They are banged up on the offensive line with no Sheriff. Their center is missing as well. I think he said that they're on their 4th center in this game. So they still have problems. And
their center, I remember the Twitter post, it was a Washington Post reporter who said that the center they're on he has an off-season job as a plus-size male model. I mean,
well, if he needs a stand-in, I think I got him.
There you go.
Casey Joyner, one thought every game. We'll get his thought on the Eagles game against Washington in just a minute. Let's look at the other game tonight. If Seattle wins, they're still in this thing. The Rams win, they all of a sudden are tied with Arizona. Arizona, I think, slightly has a tiebreaker now. But this is a big game tonight. You don't want this Russell Wilson hanging around the playoff mix here. So one thought on the game tonight.
One thought on the game tonight is Wilson's played a lot better of late since when he got injured, his finger injured, they said, okay, he's going to be out. I think it was for 8 weeks. And if you look at where he was when he came back, he tried to come back earlier, and he looked terrible when he came back. And then as his fingers gotten better, he's played better. So I think we're going to see the typical Russell Wilson. The problem for Seattle, though, Lockett's out, and Metcalf, when you look at his metrics, he's banged up, and his metrics show it that he just can't get open like he did when he's healthy. The amount of distance he's getting away from coverage when he runs out for passes per NFL Next Gen stats is really bad. So I think that their passing game is going to be crippled enough just because of injuries and such that I think the Rams will win this, even regardless of how well the Rams play.
All right, one thought every game. Let's take a look back at what it meant this past weekend. Let's go all the way back to Saturday, if you can remember. Indianapolis ran the ball all over New England. John Taylor won 70, only 12 passes for Carson Wentz, but it was enough for the Colts to now pull themselves into a possibility of winning that division.
Yeah, they could win that division. It looked like they needed an upset loss in order to make that thing possible. They got it. We'll talk about Tennessee in a minute. But the thing about the Colts, they've got that thing of run the damn ball, and they did. And Carson Wentz has thrown 22 or fewer passes in 3 of the past 4 games. It wasn't just the Patriots that they're not passing the ball against. They're saying we're going to lean on the run heavily. And by the way, Frank Reich says that so far, Jonathan Taylor, they don't see any problems of wear and tear with him so far for how many times they've given the ball, which is scary for the rest of the league.
All right, one thought every game, Carolina, Buffalo. Carolina essentially done now with the loss. Buffalo hanging on to the 7th spot. They got some help last night with Cleveland losing that game. So Buffalo, number 7 after the win.
Yeah, well, if you talk about that, because they've got some issues, they've got some COVID issues now, so that's going to be a problem for them coming up. But for this game, I got to give them credit because this is the perfect trap game for them that they could have, been looking forward to New England. Hey, we got to go back there. No, they took care of business and said we needed to take care. We need to do what we need to do here, and they did fairly handily. So you got to give Sean McDermott credit for keeping his team focused on the opponent because a lot of teams would have looked past them. And by the way, they looked past Jacksonville a few weeks ago, so that might have been the push for that.
Yes, one thought every game. Arizona looked past Detroit. Detroit whipped them. A huge loss for Arizona. I mean, I can't seem to say, okay, it was late in the season. They went from the 1 seed to the 4 seed, and now they're in trouble in that division.
They're in trouble in the division, and they didn't take Detroit seriously. And they should have, because Detroit's done more than enough this year to think that especially if we're going to Detroit, I mentioned it in one of my articles earlier this week that they had 4 games against top-flight opponents coming into that contest, and they'd lost to those 4 top-flight opponents at home, if you go to Detroit to face them, by a total of 14 points. So Arizona should have taken them seriously, and they didn't. And that's not looking good for their coaching staff, because that's a game where I know it's an opponent you can easily overlook, but there are reasons you could sell to that team that you shouldn't. So that speaks badly for Arizona, because I think they're not playing to their talent level, and they haven't been doing so for a few weeks now.
No Hopkins for them either. That Arizona team worries me. One thought every game. New York is done, but Miami wins again. Now, they had to fight a little harder in this, but now they win at 7-7. Sets up a big one against New Orleans on Monday night for both those teams, but the Dolphins are still in it.
They are, and when they were 1-7, I thought, hey, this might be the end for their coach. I mean, were playing that bad. They were playing below their talent level, and they've had a weak schedule over the past 6 weeks. It's not like they're beating top flight foes. They're facing a lot of weak teams, but to run off 6 straight wins against those kind of teams speaks very well. They're getting aggressive as can be on the defensive front. I don't know how long they can keep that up, though. I mean, it's just because you wear your team out if you go with an aggressive approach every single week, but it's working for them so far. So you got to give them credit for finding a solution to their problem.
One thought every game. Dallas, New York. Now, New York stinks. Dallas, though, sleepwalks through, wins. Time management issues for Dallas, though, but they get the win. They're now the 2 seed, but they just don't feel like a 2 seed right now.
They don't. They got Pollard back. They have Pollard and Zeke, who are both banged up, and I think that's a key to that team, is that they need that. They came and said, hey, we've got Zeke. He's been banged up. We got Pollard, though. So now it's like, well, you need a third back sometimes, too. The Eagles have seen that. You need to have somebody else, and Clement's not the guy to be their third back. So they need those two to get healthy, which is really tough to do when you're using them as much as they are. So that's a big problem for them. Their defense is going to help them win some games. The defense can keep getting picks. They can keep doing this. But if you're relying on picks to win games every week, or turnovers to win games every week, it's going to be a problem, because eventually you're going to face a team that's not going to give them to you.
One thought every game. Tennessee, Pittsburgh. This was a good one, back and forth. But in the end, Pittsburgh gets the win, and that division's still wide open, and Tennessee's in trouble in the South.
Tennessee's in big trouble. They don't have any kind of a passing game at all. And the Steelers having Hayden back. Hayden's a shutdown corner, and he made that game-winning tackle. So he's a big difference maker in their secondary. I got to give the Steelers credit. The flip side of Tomlin, we talk about it over the years, the Tomlin is when you play down to the opponent's talent level. When you face a good team, you play up to that level. So give Tomlin credit for that one.
All right, one thought every game. Houston, Jacksonville. I mean, not much to say here, but we did say on Friday, I think you said you thought Jacksonville would take all that anger with Urban Meyer. No, they got spanked. They stink.
They do. They're terrible. Mind you, at least they got Robinson involved back in their offense. They were benching him for no reason other than Urban Meyer didn't seem to like him because he didn't go to Ohio State. So, I mean, you got to give him credit there. I got to credit to Houston, though, too, that their coach has them at least playing hard. They're not a good team, but they played very hard all year long. He will probably lose his job, but it won't be because he didn't keep his team focused. He just doesn't have much talent, but you can say that about both teams.
One thought, every game, Cincinnati-Denver was a good one. I mean, ugly game, but close. And Cincinnati, they went on the road to Denver. Does that make it finally time to say, I believe in you? They're in first place right now, a 4 seed.
I believe in them maybe as an AFC playoff contender, that they're legit. I mean, obviously their record says they are. They beat
Andy Dalton Bengals playoff team.
You got it. That's a perfect way to put it. And you wouldn't think so with who they have on offense, but Chase has hit the wall, and they've got Higgins and Boyd, and Higgins have played well, Boyd not so, but Chase is completely at the wall. Mixon's been banged up. I wrote about him in my athletic article yesterday, telling fantasy managers, if you've got a deep bench, you may want to think about benching Joe Mixon because he's done terrible for 3 straight games now. So it's a problem for them. It's another situation where if you lean too heavily on one particular running back and don't have somebody behind him that can do something, it's a problem if that back gets hurt, and the Bengals are finding that out.
One thought every game, San Francisco, they stomped Atlanta. Atlanta kind of drifted out. San Francisco kind of hammering down that they're going to be a playoff team.
They are. Well, power football survives. And mind you, look who they're on. They're on Jeff Wilson. Okay, I mean, they're that deep into their backfield, and Wilson had a very good game. And mind you, they're getting Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel maybe the best back in the league at running outside zone. And he's a wide receiver, but he's that good at running that particular type of play. And they have a lot of things that allow him to use the vision that he has to incorporate him as a back. So it's creativity on Kyle Shanahan's part, not just with schemes and things of that nature, but where he can play his personnel. And again, they've got power personnel, which works well in December, can work well in January. So I think the 49ers, I'm not going to call them a sleeper Super Bowl contender, but I'm not going to be surprised that they make the playoffs and make some noise.
Green Bay, Baltimore, one thought on that game. Obviously, Harbaugh goes for 2. It backfires on him again. Great game. A lot of fun. Green Bay, number 1 seed. Baltimore is now out.
And Baltimore, it's a great call he made, because people say, well, why do you make that kind of a call? Well, he's got Huntley finally doing something at the end of the game. Your offense is really hot. Why not go ahead and try and win it now versus try and win it later, because you don't know if he's going to get another chance. Green Bay, the story here, though, is Green Bay again gets into a shootout. It's defense since week 11, or you look over week 12. It's the past 3 or 4 weeks. They're 23rd in points allowed per drive to opposing teams. Their defense stinks right now. It's not good, and they're getting into too many shootouts. We talk about this all the time. If you have to continually get in the shootouts, if you're trying to get in the playoffs, even if they win the number 1 seed, if you're trying to win the Super Bowl, can you win 3 straight shootouts? The odds say you can't. So Green Bay needs to shore up its defense.
One thought every game. Maybe this game here may have changed the complexion of the playoffs more than anyone. New Orleans shuts out Tampa. New Orleans went from afterthought to now they were the 7 seed. They're tied. They're in 8th, but they've got a pretty easy slate the rest of the way. And Tampa had a shot to take over the 1 seed, and they lose this game.
New Orleans has defense. New Orleans has a running game, and Sean Payton knows how to get the most out of each of those. He's proven that in the past. Everybody thinks he's so pass heavy, but the last few years they've been winning with that formula, because Drew Brees wasn't what Drew Brees was. But the Bucs, it just says something that how fast you can go from where they were to where they are now, because Godwin's out for the year and Evans is out in that game, and Gronk looks like he's hitting the wall a little bit, and you start adding up those injury issues. It's so bad that they're letting Antonio Brown come back after they basically, well, we're not going to let you come back if you screw up. Well, they're letting him come back, and that's how bad they need him. But for the Bucs, I think that the Godwin loss is gargantuan. He was a very much a focal point of their passing game, and I think it changes the dynamic of their team with him being out.
All right, one thought every game last night. Vegas beats Cleveland. Cleveland, if the win, they would have been in the playoffs number 4. Instead, they're all the way down at the bottom of the AFC playoff list.
It says something, you can't beat Las Vegas. But hey, Las Vegas to do as bad as it did versus Cleveland with the situation that Cleveland had, it doesn't speak well for them either. So really ugly game. But the Browns, they're looking like the Browns again, where they're losing games they ought to win, which is what we said about them for years. So it doesn't speak well for where they are, even with all the issues they had, because that was a winnable game for them last night.
And then one thought every game. Minnesota wins. It puts them in the 7th spot. Chicago, just awful.
8 out of 9 losses. The problem last night, though, the biggest issue for Minnesota, you get the win, but Chicago had 9 red zone trips and they scored 9 points. I mean, five red zone trips. They had only 9 points. Their offense did nothing, and they should have done something. Minnesota, that's a game they should have lost. By the way, Kirk Cousins, that's a career low in passing yards in a game that he started. And he did it against a second that was missing all 4 of its starters due to various issues. So that shows you how bad they miss Adam Thielen. They need him back, because even with Justin Jefferson out there, if Thielen's not there, they're too one-dimensional in the passing game.
That's one thought on every game. What's it going to look like tonight in Philadelphia?
I think Philadelphia will probably win this game fairly handily, because they've got a formula that, even though Washington is going to be able to slow their ground game, Washington has too many injuries and too many issues, and I think they'll get a couple of picks. The way their defense has been playing, I think they'll get at least a couple of picks with Gilbert tonight, if Gilbert throws the ball very often. And if that happens, I think they win this game. I wouldn't be surprised to win this game by 10 points.
One thought every game in the books. Casey's back on Thursday. We are off on Friday. He'll be back to give us one thought on every Week 16 game. Oh, my gosh. We're getting to the end of the season, but we're having a lot of fun. We might have a clearer picture of the playoffs. I doubt it by then. All right, Casey. We will talk to you Thursday, man.
Appreciate it.
One thought every game in the books. That's Casey Joyner. Always does a great job. And, of course, he'll be back on Thursday's show to give us one thought on all the games that are going to be happening on Sunday because we're off on Friday. We will have a special Friday show for you. The state of the Philly sports teams. We'll do the state of the Phillies at 2, the state of the Sixers at 3, the state of the Eagles at 4, football at 4, and, of course, the state of the Flyers at 5. When we come back, Rob Maaddi from the Associated Press. It's an interesting stat about him not covering the game live in person for the first time in a while. Don't miss it. Next. All right, 532 Sports Bash. It is a bizarre situation where the Eagles are playing tonight. We don't typically have Rob Maaddi on to preview a game on game night. But alas, we have Tuesday night football coming up in about an hour and a half right here on 97.3 ESPN. Rob Maaddi from the Associated Press. Now, Rob typically would be covering this game. He is not covering the game tonight. So statistically speaking, what would that mean for the Eagles?
Man, I got a trend, Mike, that's 100% trend, something that you won't get out of any Las Vegas insider. Since 2000, I have covered 169 out of 173 Eagles regular season home games. The 4 I did not cover, they won. They're undefeated. Right. They're 4-0. So take the Eagles on the money line tonight. I don't know about the 9.5, but take the Eagles and win.
Now it jumped up to 9.5. It's been all over the place, this thing. It was 6, it was 7, it was 12.5, 10, 9.5. We did find out that Washington football team will go with Garrett Gilbert as their starting quarterback, and obviously they found that out today. He's been there for 72 hours. I'll start with this question for you, Rob. If the Eagles lose this game, what's more disappointing, this loss or the Giant loss?
This one. This is a game where you're facing a guy who wasn't even on a roster a week ago, is literally off the street, right? And he steps in there. This would be worse than the Joe Webb game. This would be the all-time worst, Mike. I can't imagine a scenario worse than this, losing to a team that's depleted by COVID like the Washington football team is. But, hey, good news for them. They did bring their benches to the link tonight, so I know they'll be warm and comfortable while they're sitting on there. But they do have some of their guys that are going to be able to play, and I just looked at the inactives are out, and Curtis Samuel's among the inactives. And some of those guys are just injuries as opposed to the COVID list. But this is a team that is ripe for not just a win, but a beatdown. And I think it will be inexcusable. I don't want to hear about the extra 2 days. Hey, the extra 2 days allowed the Eagles to get Jalen Hurts a little bit healthier, and he's going to be going out there, and he's going to be able to get the start tonight. So go out there, run the football down their throats, and pass the ball as well. Mix in some play action, let it work, and let's see what they can do and get out of there with a nice, easy victory. And you got to heal up quickly because it's a 4-day turnaround, and good thing for them, they're facing the Giants, but we'll talk about that on Thursday.
Yes, inactives, only 4 for the Eagles, none of which of any, none of them have played at all this year. So why only 4 guys on the inactive list?
A bunch are on the reserve. You got Landon Dickerson's on the reserve COVID list. So if you're on the reserve COVID list, you're not technically on the roster to have to be inactive.
Gotcha. All right. So there's only 4 names that have appeared. It's Reed Sennett, Kerry Vincent, Tay Gowan, and Tupolutu, the defensive tackle. So obviously the Eagles are pretty healthy in this game. Washington, all sorts of problems. Dickerson being out, do you anticipate that being an issue at all?
It could be somewhat, but with Washington being depleted up front too, defensive line, the Eagles still have enough bodies and still enough capable bodies. Run the ball to the right side. You got Lane Johnson out there. Follow him. I know Maylado on the left will be a truck, and it'll be interesting to see what Sua Opeta can do tonight. But this is a game where I think the Eagles should control it from start to finish. No letdown. No, we're only facing Garrett Gilbert and a team that has a bunch of roster replacement guys on there. No, go out there, take control of business, and don't let them even sniff an opportunity, because that's, we all think about the Tuesday. We think about Joe Webb because that was the last Tuesday game way back in 20. That game actually cost the Eagles home field advantage. Well, a bye and a second round home field advantage. They still won the division, but then lost to Green Bay at home.
I was at that game, and the one big difference that night was Joe Webb was really the only reserve playing for Minnesota.
Yeah.
Washington is playing a plethora of reserves tonight, including, I believe we had John Keim on earlier. I think he said they're on their 4th center tonight. Brandon Sheriff is out. They're all pro right guard. So that the interior of their line is a disaster right now. He said Kyle Fuller and their starting safety are 2 guys that will not play tonight either. So he actually believes that moving the game, while they got guys back on the defensive front, they lost guys on the offensive front, and that hurt them more.
That's interesting because, losing Sheriff is a big one for them. He's a really good guard, and that is going to hurt. And that so not only does it hurt them in that for this game you lose some offensive guys, you get some defensive guys back, but now they also have a shorter turnaround before they take on the Cowboys on in their next game. So it was disappointing that the league moved this game. I understand why they were trying to do it, but it was disappointing that this game was moved. From a selfish standpoint, I love football, Mike, every night of the week. So if you're going to give me Monday Night Football, Tuesday Night Football, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, I'll take it. I'm not going to complain as a guy focused now on covering the NFL in its entirety. That doesn't bother me at all, but I just don't think it was fair to the fan base or to the teams themselves. And the Eagles weren't happy about it. You could tell in their little terse statement that they put out on Friday. We have been informed that the league has moved our game. No, and I know people were a little bit misguided along with those forfeit thoughts and comments, because when the league threatened forfeit action before the season, and I had written about it then, both teams wouldn't get paid. So when Darius Slay puts out a tweet, hey, I thought they were going to forfeit. Well, dude, you want to get paid too. So you got to play the game to get paid. And nobody wants to see forfeit wins anyway.
Right. I think the forfeit thing would have been unfortunate. It was more like, I think it was more that you said this is what you were going to do, and then you backed off on that more than we really want a forfeit win. You wrote about it at the Associated Press, Rob. The NFL made the decision to reduce testing for asymptomatic players. So how will that change possibly the complexion of the league from this point forward? It doesn't take place tonight, but starting week 16, we could see a big change.
Yeah, and the new testing protocols started yesterday. So this was a story that really consumed my weekend, man. And it's kind of weird because I had a lot of conversations with a lot of people involved in these negotiations who told me a lot of important information that they didn't want to go on record with. So I put out a version of the story, yet I know a lot more behind the scenes. And some of those things I can talk about, even though I didn't write it. And one of those being the NFLPA has all along advocated for daily testing. So for the NFLPA to go from wanting daily testing to agree to what the NFL decided to do on Saturday, which is no longer even weekly testing for asymptomatic, for unvaccinated players, but a targeted testing plan, was a big change. You're asking for daily testing, and now you go, okay. But ultimately, what the PA can do is give its players information they can recommend. Players want these games played because they know if the games aren't played, they don't get paid. So the union can only do what its membership wants it to do. So they may not necessarily agree with it, but they went along with it. So now the NFL's got this targeted testing plan. And what we saw was 47 guys yesterday, Mike, go on the COVID list. Another 21 today, 7 more guys on the Chiefs. Tyreek Hill's now on it. Yesterday was Travis Kelce and Harrison Butker. Not surprising to most people, Cole Beasley from the Bills ended up on the COVID list today. I'm surprised it took this long, but he's on the COVID list because he's unvaccinated. He won't even be able to play because he's got to isolate and quarantine for 10 days. If you are vaccinated, what they did do with these new protocols is allow players to come back sooner. And there's 3 different variables that go in there. But now you can see asymptomatic, unvaccinated players return a lot sooner than the 10 days. And what the league is hoping to do, I believe, through this targeted testing plan is if guys are asymptomatic and they are vaccinated, well, they may not necessarily show any symptoms and they're not going to test and they're going to sneak through and play because nobody knows about it. And that's going to allow some of the numbers to go down. But then you got this Omicron variant that's going crazy and more people are testing positive. It's strange, man, but this is the world we live in. So the story I wrote last night after speaking to various medical experts was this could be the new norm, not just for the NFL, Mike, but for most sports leagues and for society, because at some point, the doctors, some of the medical experts I spoke to said, at some point you're going to have to live with this virus. You're going to have to deal with it. And what the NFL is doing now may be setting a precedent where, all right, we have a population that's nearly 95% vaccinated. They're safe within their own little bubble. Now, they may not be when they go home and have other people who they're around who are unvaccinated, but this could lead to more teams and more businesses, more corporations, more institutes of higher learning and higher education, everyone else following along what the NFL is doing now.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because we had mentioned, like, you know, in the world that we're living, I'm not comparing one illness or a virus to another, but the Michael Jordan flu game would never have happened had there been someone that said, hey, look, the flu is contagious. You can't play. It was just, hey, I feel physically that I can perform even if I'm being held down by something. At what point does someone say, if you feel like you can play, you go out there? Now, that's a very touch and go subject because, you know, I mean, but it feels like the NFL is saying, if you feel like you can play, go on out there and do it.
Yeah, and I think some of the critics of what the NFL is doing kind of described it as see no evil, hear no evil, right? If we don't know that they're COVID positive, they can go out there and play. And now they're leaving it up to the players to report symptoms. If you have symptoms, report them. And they're really reliant now on players being honest. And
how's that going? How's that going to go?
Yeah, that's a great question, because you think a guy's going to go into a big game with the sniffles and a runny nose, and he's going to say, hey, I'm vaccinated, so I feel I can play through this. I can't imagine they're going to self-report some of that stuff.
No way. No.
And what we're going to find is I think this is going to be the way of the new normal, where people who when you have a big population who is vaccinated, boosted, and everything else that the CDC has recommended, hey, what the NFL is doing, this is important. In all the criticism they've received, I think we need to point out that what they're doing is following and going a little bit above CDC guidelines, because CDC guidelines also says you don't have to test healthy, asymptomatic, vaccinated individuals. You don't have to test them. And the NFL actually is doing it with the randomized targeted testing. So they're doing a little bit more than the CDC requires.
Real quick, you were in Tampa on Sunday night. That game flipped the playoff thing upside down because we thought New Orleans was kind of an afterthought. Yeah. They win. They were in the 7th spot for a day. They're now 8, but it really changed the dynamic for the 1 seed.
It sure did, and for the Saints getting that now, if it comes down to Eagles and Saints, Eagles beat them, so they get head to head. But you got to worry about 2, 3, 14 different tiebreakers and everything else. And then when you look at it, Green Bay now is in the driver's seat as the 1 seed, and Dallas right now is 2. But if Tampa wins out, they'll get the 2 seed. But Mike, what I'm eyeing, right? What I'm looking at is Tampa ending up winning out despite their injuries and getting that 2 seed, and the Eagles getting the 7. And guess what we have? Yep. We got the Buccaneers against the Eagles week 1 of the playoffs, and I think it's the Maaddi Bowl, man. I can't wait for that part 2.
Well, there's also a scenario, you know, if Dallas wins out, that it could be a back-to-back Philly Dallas week 18 playoffs. We've seen that playoff scenario happen before as well. Rob Maaddi, Associated Press. Eagles got to win tonight, right? I mean, you're playing. Uncle Rico's playing quarterback.
Yeah, and a lot of people are looking at the only question is, do they cover or do they not cover? I'm always concerned with a backdoor. With a backdoor, when it's a number like that, 9.5, 10, a backdoor cover, I would take the Eagles. They got to win. I'm not there. They've never lost a regular season home game. We already discussed that when I'm not there in the last 22 years. But I think they also cover this game.
22 years of this trend. 4-0. There you go. Rob Maaddi, what's happening on Faith on the Field this weekend?
It's our Christmas special, and none other than Tim Tebow. He was on a couple months ago, bringing him back. Always good to catch up with Tim. So we're bringing him back for our Christmas special episode this weekend. Caught up with him, find out what he feels
I
about Christmas.
love how you just go right back to the coffers and say, "Hey, Tim, you ready to do another episode?" Christmas morning, we'll have that for you here on 97.3 ESPN. Christmas morning, Rob Maaddi and Tim Tebow, 9 a.m. right here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, we will talk to you on Thursday. We'll kind of recap this one. We'll look ahead to the Giants, right back at it as the Eagles take on Washington tonight, and Sunday they'll be at home against the Giants. You know, they haven't won at home since November 21st, 1 month to the day.
Wow. They get it tonight, Mike. No problem. Absolutely.
All right, Rob, we'll talk to you then.
Appreciate it.
Rob Maaddi from the Associated Press here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill. We're going to wrap up the show. I'll give you my pick for the game, my game balls, and more. Don't forget, Eagles Radio Network coverage begins at 6 o'clock right here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, 5:53, getting ready to wrap up the show. We got Eagles Radio Network coverage coming up at the top of the hour tonight, so about 6 minutes away from that. Josh, my final score will be Philadelphia 29, Washington 9.
How'd you end up at 29?
I don't know. 29-9 will be my final score tonight.
I don't even know how you get to 29, but all right.
29-9. Game balls. Defense. Javon Hargrave.
I mean, considering they're on their fourth center and no sheriff, makes sense to me.
I thought about that. That's how I came up with that.
Nice.
Pretty smart, right?
I like that.
Jordan Howard, offense. I think that his turnaround, hand him the ball.
First game back.
Let him just kind of weigh them down.
Just bowling ball.
Yeah. 29-9, Philadelphia. That'll be the score when we come back tomorrow. Sal Palantonio kicks off the show tomorrow at 2:05 to break it all down. Grayson's grades, Jeff Mosher, Joe Valerio, Jeff Kerr, all the particulars. Josh, you have the night off tonight. Enjoy that. You'll be back tomorrow. We'll be back tomorrow right here on the Sports Bash Live.
We will be back tomorrow.
Yes, we will be back tomorrow. You got a score tonight? You got a pick?
Yeah, I got a pick. Give me 24-10 Eagles.
24-10. More conventional.
More conventional.
Yeah, 29-9, 24-10 is your score. Mine 29-9.
I have the Eagles covering.
Andrew DiCecco had 31-14, something like that. Casey Joyner had them by 10. I forget Pete Thompson's pick. That was way back in the 2:00 hour.
That was a while ago. Yeah,
it was. All right, have a great night.
Remembers his pick now,
right? He's probably a couple sheets to the wind by now.
No.
No. All right, we'll be back tomorrow here on the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN. Our coverage of the Eagles and Washington football team, Tuesday Night Football. It's next. Have a great night, everybody.